Newlywed to newborn. Ordering out to tucking in. Dream car to driveway. Isn't it nice when things arrive quicker than expected? Enter your location into our digital new car locator, and it instantly tells you if the BMW you want is available nearby. So it'll be with you quicker than you might think. Search BMW New Car Locator today.
State news, pandemic-weary New Yorkers, eager to escape the confines of city living, may push up suburban New Jersey home prices by the most in 16 years. This looks like the 1970s, which was a time when people were leaving the cities, says Jeffrey Auto, president of real estate consultancy Auto Valuation Group. In Manhattan, Jose Cuervo heiress Karen Virginia Beckman has obtained a $19 million loan against her apartment at 432 Park Avenue on so-called Billionaires Row. The transaction offers a glimpse at how the rich leverage assets for liquidity. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Global news 24 hours a day.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the Southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stocks are lower after a volatile week with investors weighing a resurgence in new virus infections and data showing a drop in U.S. incomes. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 0.7% on 22 points at 3061. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 1.1% or 282 points at 25,462. The Nasdaq's down 0.75% or 75 points at 9941. 10-year Treasury up 7/32, yield 0.66%. They yield on the 2-year 0.17%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.9% or 35 cents at 38.36 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.7% or $13.20 at 17.57.70 an ounce. The euro 1.1215 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.19. And data showed consumer spending surged by a record in May as Americans spend relief payments, though incomes slumped. Big banks sliding easing following yesterday's rally after the Federal Reserve capped dividends and banned buybacks through September. Bank of America is down 3.7% and Wells Fargo down 4.8%. The Gap is up more than 32.5% after announcing a partnership with Kanye West's Yeezy fashion label. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. One of the joys this year, in the past 12 months, was to soiree down to Washington, this is pre-pandemic, and wander into a building and see a wonderfully reinvigorated International Institute for Finance. And this is under the leadership of Tim Adams. He is out of Kentucky. Tim Adams serving the nation at Treasury and took on the wonderful job at IIF, the consortium of all the banks worldwide, truly reinvigorating that important institution. And we're thrilled that Tim Adams could join us this morning. Tim, how is IIF doing in a pandemic? I mean, I guess you go virtual, but if any of our listeners' groups wants to get together, there's nothing like physical contact, is there?
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. And that's probably the best intro I think I've ever had. About 14, 15 weeks ago, we went virtual. We've done 40 events over that period of time, 6,000 participants. So we didn't miss a beat. We're able to function from home, from our basements, our garages, our attics. I do miss my colleagues. I miss seeing our clients and our friends around the world, and I look forward to being able to do that. But we're out there functioning every day.
Tim, one of the great questions, and there's a stress test in the global issue in European banking and that, and the big banks, the ones that you spend a lot of time talking to, is we're all waiting for consolidation. Does this disease, this virus, this pandemic, does it speed up that process or does it delay the process of global banking consolidation?
Good question, Tom. I think in the short term, we're all firefighting. We're ensuring that capital continues to flow to the real economy. But I think once we come out of that, it'll be a recognition that we need consolidation. I think we're going to see it in Europe. We've seen a couple of announcements in the Gulf states over the last couple of days, some large banks consolidating. We're going to see it in Asia. And the U.S. has been consolidating for 20 or 30 years, and that process will continue, if not accelerate.
So, Tim, I guess I have to admit, not being a banking expert, but I've read a lot of the research this morning. I was a little bit surprised that the Federal Reserve added some new rules that could limit dividends and buybacks, because I thought the stress test, the banks came through in pretty good shape. I've been told by bank analysts and fund managers that the banks are in much better shape now than they were going into the 2008 financial crisis. How do you kind of play that, or what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, the Fed said quite explicitly we're the source of strength for the economy rather than the source of the problem. So very different than 2008, 2009. And in the intervening period, we've raised globally almost $4 trillion worth of capital. So the banks are well capitalized. Lending is up in the U.S. Deposits are up, and we're channeling resources to the real economy. But the stress test showed that we need to continue to husband resources for potential downside going forward.
So is the sense that this is a precautionary measure? Because as I look at some of the big banks, the J.P. Morgans, the Bank of Americas of the world, the balance sheets look pretty rock solid to me.
I completely agree. I think this is being just cautionary. That's the Fed's job. And I must applaud the Fed. Jay Powell and Randy Quarles and others have done a remarkable job in this period of time. It is precautionary. I think it makes sense. The stock prices have taken a hit this morning. We saw the same thing in Europe when similar measures are put in place. But it is time for caution, and this is extreme caution. I applaud the Fed's efforts.
Tim Adams, how is the relationship of our August politicians with the bankers? I mean, what was it, 4 years ago, we had bankers lined up swearing in Congress and all that. Is the relationship proved a bit?
Oh, the relationship is much better. We have a great relationship with the current administration, also members of Congress. Again, Tom, we're part of the solution. We're channeling capital to the real economy. Lending is up. Deposits are up. We have visions in place for mortgage relief, for auto relief. So, yes.
Well, no, that's very fair. That the Trump administration, I think, has been very much pro sort of corporation and Wall Street and that. How do you, Tim, and with your wonderful political attuneness, how do you feel the banks will adapt to the protests across this nation that are much more social, not so much Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. How will the banks immediately adapt to that?
That's a great question, Tom. If you look at Jamie Dimon, who headed the business roundtable for the past 3 years, he, among other corporate leaders, are looking for ways to promote diversity within their own institutions. We need to reach out to forgotten communities, those who feel that not only economy but socially they've been left behind. We need to do a better job there, without question, and that's the real challenge before us.
What I find, Tim Adams, so important here is there's been some true leadership and indeed governance on this by selected bankers, but it's got to get much broader within banking, even farther beyond than the IIF. Are you optimistic bankers can do that?
I'm optimistic that we can be a part of the solution without question. I've done a number of phone calls this week where the top topic was how can we play a positive role in society, not just in capital formation and lending, but how can we be a real agent of change? Social. Yes, absolutely.
One of the reasons, folks, I hope this pandemic ends is so I can do a soiree in Washington with Tim Adams and the IIF. It is an important meeting with a lot of really, really good expert discussion. Tim Adams, he is the CEO of the International Institute for Finance. Paul, what an odd week, Paul. I'm supposed to say that was an interesting week or that. It was just an odd week. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Lots of economic data conflicting, but, I think the overriding issue for the markets here, Thomas, is the resurgence in some of these big states we're seeing in the Sun Belt. And, I think the market was really hoping that we were approaching the other side, that the good news we were seeing in states like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut would be more of a national story, and it's just not there. So still some more pain to go through, it looks like, from that perspective. It's
going to be, I'll tell you, folks, it's going to be fascinating to see as we begin, or I should say stagger into the second half of 2020. The Dow, negative 281. The VIX, 32.77. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak in decisions? Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With rollbacks on Hellman's Real Mayonnaise, 705 grams was £2.75, now £2. And a 6-pack of Warburton Sandwich Thins was £1, now 75p. Wham bam, add your lunchtime ham. Find thousands of rollbacks across our stores. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Offers end 1st of July.
Enjoy peace of mind with Ford. Relax and think about 3 months deferred payment on a new vehicle. Visualize an additional 3 months cash back. Breathe deeply and let 0% APR representative on selected vehicles wash over you. That's peace of mind from Ford. Current promotion ends 30th of June. Search Ford Peace of Mind for details.
Only available with Ford credit on selected finance plans. Exclusions and deposit restrictions may apply.
Want to get all your college sports news in one place? Turn on the Yahoo Sports College podcast to hear experts Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty, and Pete Thamel break down the latest NCAA stories from the football field to the basketball court and beyond.
I think Reggie should do a video of him running to Heritage Hall and front flipping in. Remember that famous front flipping the end zone that he did? Wasn't he the one who made that popular?
I think he was. I think he was, yeah.
Search Yahoo College Sports Podcast on TuneIn to listen.
be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
We don't know how many companies can accept people back on their roster.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
There's still a coronavirus risk.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy the dip mentality, that takes time.
Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market?
Does the shape of the yield curve matter?
We're looking at late 2021, early 2022, where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Friday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to chat with Mike Mullaney, Director of Global Markets Research at Boston Partners. We'll get his take on the markets. And later in the program, a very important conversation, Lauren Sauer, Johns Hopkins University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine, get her thoughts on the spread of the virus, which seems to be ravaging parts of the Sun Belt. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
We just got word, Paul, Texas, as the governor there has ordered that they shut down taverns in the state, including the Hill Country. Meanwhile, stocks are down again. Treasuries are up as a resurgence in new virus infections threatens to halt progress on reopening the American economy. We take a look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is down 0.75%, down 24. Dow's down 1.1%, down 297. And the NASDAQ is down 0.9%, down 87. The 10-year is up 7/30 seconds. The yield 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.1% at $38.29 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.75% at $17.5740 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 107.17. The euro is $1.1208, and the British pound $1.2356. In the face of the raging pandemic, American Airlines says it'll sell flights to capacity starting July 1st, abandoning caps on passenger loads that were designed to promote social distancing amid the pandemic. Customers, they say, will still be notified when they're booked on crowded flights and can move their reservation at no cost. American Airlines is down 3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway now. Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, thank you. And while the virus seems to be on the offense, stocks are on the defense today. A Friday trade, no doubt. Let's bring in Dave Wilson to explain to us what exactly is going on. Certainly the banks are not faring so well today.
Absolutely not, Bonnie. I mean, if you look at the S&P 500, the 10 biggest declines at the moment all belong to the banks. And you put that all together, and it's about the Federal Reserve's decision to require them to maintain their dividends and not buy back shares through the third quarter. They're going to have to resubmit capital plans. I mean, all this tied into the coronavirus pandemic and the potential effect on the financial system. So you're seeing stocks take a hit because of that. The financial shares especially. So really, it's a matter at this point of, getting through the day and then getting to the close of trading when the Russell indexes all get, as they say, reconstituted. It's an annual overhaul. I mean, that's when you're going to see all the trading, no question. What we're seeing at the moment, relatively muted, you might say. And a lot of it's going to happen in that last half hour and then be recorded after the close, because it'll happen right on the close as the indexes get reshuffled.
How often does that occur on an annual basis, Dave?
Once a year.
Well, okay, so this
always
is big.
At the end of June. So, and that's the difference between, say, the Russell indexes and the S&P indexes, like the S&P 500, that they change over time. And for institutions, every time you shift the index around, you have to trade to reflect that. Buy what goes in, sell what goes out, or kind of reduce or increase the percentage that you have in a given stock. And it all comes with a trading cost. And, one of the advantages that Russell has traditionally touted is that, it's all once a year. You get it done. It's over with. You don't have that cost throughout the year. Of course, it means there's a whole lot of trading, too. I went back to last year, and if you looked at the last half-hour trading and then after the close, more than half the shares on the day trading recorded at that time when you look at stocks listed either on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So really, it's going to be a burst of buying and selling at day's end.
What does it mean for the different styles of investing that Bank of America says the number of growth stocks may plunge to 421 from 533? Value index membership might rise by more than 100 to 843.
Well, as much as anything, it's a function of just how, the markets have moved over time. There's been so much focus on the biggest technology companies, and they certainly fit the growth category. So, as much as anything, it's a function of how investors have kind of, moved over time. So, when you talk about that kind of shift between growth and value, that's going to be part of the mix in terms of what, investors have to deal with, not only today, but going forward. I mean, if you have to own more stocks, again, that comes at a cost. So, it's going to be something that affects potentially their performance down the line.
So, Davis, we take a look at the market this week. I mean, Tom kind of, was saying in the last hour, it's just an odd week for him in terms of the markets and things like that. To me, it kind of comes down to the story of the week was kind of the pandemic and the resurgence and things like that. And maybe the market fatigue saying, oh, boy, here we go again. Kind of how do you characterize this week's trading? Again, another week day today.
Well, you have to not only consider what's been going on this week, but you have to remember what's been going on this quarter. It's been quite the performance for the S&P 500. Just
true.
Looking at where we are right now, you're still up 18% for the quarter. And, earlier on, you saw gains of more than 20%. And see, you don't generally see that kind of advance in a quarter. So to see things kind of tailing off as we come to the end, not exactly a surprise. You look back to find the last 20% plus gain for a quarter in the S&P 500. You have to go all the way back to 1998. The fourth quarter of that year. So it's been an exceptional period, and to see things kind of settle down as we get toward the end, waiting for those second quarter earnings, which are by all accounts going to be abysmal, doesn't exactly come as a surprise.
So for sure, Dave, the direction today is down, and the S&P is down 0.9% on the sort of the major themes that you talked about. But there are some stocks higher, and retailers among them. You have Kohl's, Ross Stores, eBay, Dollar Tree, and then of course Gap, which is up 39%. But that's again a separate story.
Gap is in a class of its own today, thanks to Kanye West. They made a deal for a line of apparel. They're going to call it Yeezy Gap. Yeezy being Kanye's nickname. Supposed to be sold starting next year. It's all a matter of Gap trying to be cool, I guess. And, so the idea that it's not just, for dads, so to speak. And you go back to 1980, you don't see a bigger gain than what we're seeing in Gap today, and potentially ever since the company went public back in 1976. So, some strength among the other retailers as well. But again, it's going to come down to what the quarterly results look like. And for a lot of these chains, we're not going to find out until August. I mean, given that their fiscal quarter is typically a month behind the calendar.
Yeah, and it's still tough on that retail. A little bit of a head fake here, in my opinion. I mean, it just seems like, all the headwinds that have been out there for retail are still there, now exacerbated by all this unemployment.
Yeah, and what's happening with the virus in terms of pulling back. I mean, we've seen Apple closing stores. We've seen Microsoft closing stores. You got to ask, are the retailers going to have to follow simply because, the virus is putting them in a position where they have to?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. The virus is obviously going to be the overwhelming theme for basically the rest of the year and into next year when it comes to economic growth and so on. And you can only hope, I think, for these smaller stories like Kanye and Gap to actually move some individual stocks. The Kanye story is amazing. I mean, you wonder what it will do to his partnership with Adidas as well. Does it dilute some of the appeal of Yeezy Adidas, which obviously has, it has a loyal fan base at this point, or does it make it, is it fine? Can they exist separately and so on?
Yeah, I just think the issues are going to be here for retailers still very much there. So no getting around that.
Yeah, exactly. Our thanks to Dave Wilson at the One Dave on Twitter, and you can always check him out at NI Wilson, NI Chart as well. He always has a chart of the day, which he'll be back on radio with a little later on. He'll be back with us in the next hour. Now, though, let's get to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager.
Bonnie, bars in Texas have just been ordered to close at noon local time today. That's after the Lone Star State's coronavirus positive test rate surpassed 11%. Governor Greg Abbott just issued an executive order that also requires restaurants in Texas to limit occupancy to 50% starting Monday. River rafting businesses will have to shut down completely. The country as a whole recorded more than 39,000 new COVID-19 cases just yesterday. That was a new one-day high. Dr. Ashish Jha is director of the Harvard Global Health Institute. Do we have enough testing to contain the spike?
We do not. We should have, we've made progress. We're up to about 500,000 tests a day, and that's improvements. But we're way below where we need to be if we're really going to use testing as part of our strategy to get this infection under control.
Dr. Anthony Fauci with the White House Coronavirus Task Force tells the Washington Post they're looking at testing people in groups. That way, if a test comes back negative in a sample from one pool, researchers would move on to the next one. If it's positive, every sample in that pool would then be tested. He says the current situation is not working. Joe Biden says he would use the powers of the presidency to encourage people to wear masks in public. The presumptive Democratic nominee was wearing a mask himself as he talked about it with Pittsburgh TV station KDKA.
The one thing we do know, these masks make a gigantic difference. I would insist that everybody on public be wearing that mask.
This puts Biden at odds with President Trump, who hasn't worn a mask in public himself and has been holding rallies without evidence of social distancing. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
Gathering world-renowned experts takes effort.
We have the perfect person.
Asking them the right questions takes Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Is this possibly early indications of a second wave?
Bloomberg Business Week.
Silicon Valley will be forever changed by this pandemic. What's your take?
Are they paying off their balances?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern.
That is a significant shift.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the fireworks won't take place, but the orchestra's 4th of July tradition will continue. The program will feature guest artists and new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen July 4th starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The market's info.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we glisten, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a machine? Or to someone called Mac, or Jack, or Miguel, or Haley, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
It could be a first-timer, or a long-timer, or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million Lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Should your kids go back to school? Ask Andrea. She's a teacher.
We're doing everything we can to keep the children safe and happy at school, which is why it's great that more of those who can are coming back, not only for their education, but for their overall well-being too. It gives them a routine, helps develop their social skills, and they get to see their friends too.
If your child is eligible, they should return to school. The government is working towards getting all pupils back in September. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Staying current on college hoops starts here on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. CBS sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen.
A day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The U.S. extends its weekly loss past 1% as the U.S. continues to report a surge in cases, and some states are halting plans to expand economic activity or reversing their plans. Data show consumer spending surged by a record in May as Americans spent relief payments, though incomes did slump. Big banks are sliding after the Federal Reserve capped dividends and banned buybacks through September. Let's go ahead and check the numbers here. The Dow is down 1.3%, down 42. That's the S&P is down 1.4%, down 42. The Dow is down 1.7%, down 430. And the NASDAQ is down 1.7%, down 166. The 10-year is up 9/32. The yield is 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.5% at $38.14 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.9% at $17.5520 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.16. The euro $1.1205, and the British pound $1.2352. Amazon.com's buying autonomous vehicle startup Zoox, a move that could potentially help the e-commerce giant slash delivery costs and create a formidable opponent to ride-hailing and food delivery companies. Terms of the deal have not been announced. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Vonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, you heard Greg Jarrett. Indices are lower today by 1.4 to 1.6%, depending on which you're looking at. However, we are at records generally. The NASDAQ just hitting a record the other day. Let's bring in somebody who has been following this. Mike Mullaney is Director of Global Markets Research at Boston Partners, $60.1 billion in assets under management. Mike, I know that you're particularly value specialists, but just give me an idea of what you make of the valuation of this overall market right now.
It looks stretched to the naked eye, I can say that. We're at about 22 times forward multiples for the S&P 500 right now as we speak. Long-term average is more in that 15 range. But with interest rates near zero, everyone's once again scratching their heads to say, is this a kind of a normal valuation range when you have discount rates this low? So it's hard to ascertain whether we're overvalued or undervalued or fairly valued this time based upon the level of interest rates.
All right, Mike, we've had this fantastic rebound off of what was an historic plunge in the early stages of the pandemic here. Are there areas that you think are still attractive here, given that, we may be seeing some more resurgence of the pandemic? This may be a longer pull than maybe people thought even as recently as several weeks ago. Are there some areas that you think are attractive?
Yeah, if you believe that we're still in the third inning of the coronavirus, which I think many of the health authorities do believe, then most likely the market's going to trade once again more towards defensive names, and that will continue to be, once again, healthcare is going to be do reasonably well. Consumer staples, etc., even potentially utilities today. Utilities being the only green spot on my screen today as we speak. So I think that will continue to be the case if we have this overhang, obviously, of the virus affecting what's happening with the markets. Away from that, from a pure valuation standpoint, and if you want to look and have a long-term perspective, you've got to look to financials. Financials are really dirt cheap now on a relative basis versus virtually every other sector in the S&P 500 and the overall market itself. You've got to have a belief, though, we're going to get some kind of an increase in interest rates over time to have confidence that financials will actually come through for you. Shape of the curve is better now. We've got a positive shape of the yield curve, but the overall level of rates is still relatively low for financials to do particularly well. And for that to happen, we're probably going to have to seek some kind of an inflationary spike happening sometime in the near future for financials to do well. But financials, by definition, by what we see right now, are definitely the cheapest part of the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because we've had this value rotation trade, conversation for so long, and it just hasn't happened yet. And I know back in 2019 you loaded up on banks and insurers and healthcare companies. What is the situation now? Are you sticking with those choices given everything that's happened since that? We were absolutely not anticipating a pandemic, causing the Fed to really up its game.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. We've had these spurts of value doing exceedingly well. From Chairman Powell's speech on 60 Minutes on May 17th forward for about 3 to 4 weeks, value did exceedingly well, including banks did exceedingly well, when he more or less, as I've said before, has kind of channeled his inner Mario Draghi to provide whatever it takes to make sure that the economy and ultimately the markets do well. And from that point forward, we did get a relief trade coming from value, but in the last week to 10 days, once again, growth has done well. As people go back and rotate into those quality growth names that seem to do well no matter what the economic environment is.
So, Mike, it's interesting. I'm wondering if you had thoughts on energy here. We've seen WTI crude, move back up close to 40 or 38 and change here on WTI. Certainly well off the lows, but perhaps not at the levels where the energy space is attractive. What's your call there?
Energy is tricky, and it's all depending upon oil, as you just mentioned. So the supply-demand situation is what's going to drive the price of oil, and that's what's going to drive the energy sector in general. We've had a rebound in oil, obviously, and in energy prices, and in the sector as well. The reason being is, the supply has been dramatically constrained from the OPEC, and obviously some slowdown as far as drilling in the United States. So we've got relief on the supply side, and at the same time, demand didn't fall as dramatically as supply did. So we've got a pop in price. But that is a very tricky proposition for anybody to look at, because you're dealing with, obviously, the politics of OPEC and once again, the effect of the coronavirus as far as overall economic activity in the United States. Energy looks cheap for all the right reasons, I guess you'd say, or maybe the wrong reasons, but no question energy is inexpensive generically if you think you're going to get a rebound in oil prices that stick someplace north of 45.
Very briefly, Mike, we had Dave Wilson on earlier explaining about the Russell reconstitution, and obviously with the way things are going, there's going to be a lot more growth stocks in it now and fewer value stocks. Does that change how you approach your strategies?
No, not really. I mean, we're still going to be value managers. We do think that, once again, if you look back at the Farmer-French factors of what drives stock prices over time, there's the big three. There's size, there's basically quality, and there's value. And we're going to continue to be value investors, pretty much irrespective of what happens in the underlying indices, as long as people are looking for specific styles and the value style remains intact, which we think it will be.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your perspective coming from the value side of the equation. Mike Mullaney, Director of Global Markets Research at Boston Partners. Just looking at a headline coming across the tape, Bonnie. Albertsons, the supermarket chain, indicated they did their IPO at 16, indicated opening 16, 17. So looking for some stability there as Albertsons prices its IPO, a rare IPO in the last, during this week at least. Coming up, we'll have more. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The race to reopen has now been thrown in reverse. The United States has registered the biggest ever jump in coronavirus cases. That's led some governors to put a halt to plans to get their economies going again. As a result, stocks are moving lower, with the Dow down more than 300 points. Airline CEOs meet with Vice President Mike Pence today on pandemic procedures. They're expected to discuss contact tracing and taking temperatures at airports. Another likely topic, the threat by the European Union to block American travelers. Grocer Albertsons is a public company again. It will debut today on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol ACI, after its initial public offering was priced last night at $16 a share. And Nike shares are falling in trading. The athletic apparel giant posted a surprise loss and disappointing sales. It's a sign that the pandemic hurt Nike's business more than expected. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. Market upheavals.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
The Mini Electric was raring to go. until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now, it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a machine? Or to someone called Mac, or Jack, or Miguel, or Haley, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, it's Ali. Can I give you a hand?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street, especially the expats. And that feeling of pride. Lots of people are rejoining now. It's easy, and we'd love to have you back. Go on, feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoiners.
It could be a first-timer, or a long-timer, or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where our rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor activities, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Avoid shared surfaces like swings or benches. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
The U or W, we'll be asking Torsten Slok that in just a few moments, and a little later on we'll be talking Texas with Bloomberg opinion columnist Tim O'Brien. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash with Greg Jarrett.
Stocks are down, Vonnie. Treasuries are up. This as a resurgence in new virus infections began halting progress on reopening the economy. The S&P has extended its weekly loss toward 2%. This as the Texas governor rolled back some reopening measures, including ordering the closing of taverns. So no more Texas two-step at Green Hall in Green, Texas. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is down 1.4%, down 43. Dow's down 1.7%, down 444, and the NASDAQ is down 1.6%, down 160. The 10-year is up 10, 30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.1% at $38.29 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.5% at $17.61.30 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.15, the euro $1.12.09, and the British pound $1.23.41. Microsoft says it will close its physical store locations permanently, but will continue to invest in a digital storefront. The move will result in a pre-tax charge of about $450 million, or a nickel a share, in the current quarter. Microsoft says that they're going to move with that activity, down almost 2% MSFT. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, as the economic impacts from the coronavirus began to be felt early in the pandemic, the Federal Reserve stepped up and did its part, aggressively injecting liquidity into the marketplace. We even had Congress with a $3 trillion fiscal stimulus plan, all designed to get cash in the hands of consumers and small to mid-sized businesses. But a lot of that stimulus is going to be running out relatively soon. The question is, does Congress need to come through with another round of fiscal stimulus to continue to keep this economy from going over a cliff? Torsten Slok, chief economist at Deutsche Bank Securities, joins us. Torsten, I kind of want to put that question to you here. How critical is it for Congress to come through with another round of fiscal stimulus?
It is very important in the sense that the Congressional Budget Office at the moment forecasts that the unemployment rate by the end of this year will be more than 10%. So that means that, remember, the unemployment rate today is 13.3, and if we still have an unemployment rate by the end of this year that is anywhere around 10 percentage points, that means that a lot of people will still not be back in jobs and therefore will not have incomes, and therefore we will need to have more income support, similar to the income support that we saw through, most importantly, higher unemployment benefits through the last several months.
Now, those benefits normally last 26 weeks, but workers who lost their job back in March will have exhausted all of their unemployment benefits by September. Torsten, do you think that Congress finds a way around those rules? And if not, how do these people manage?
Well, so I'm reading on my Bloomberg screen at the moment that there's a lot of talk about more fiscal support coming. But, Vonnie, to your question here, it is all about the exact design. Will the new fiscal support that comes, will that be infrastructure? That will not directly help households, and if anything, infrastructure takes a long time. There are not that many shovel-ready projects normally when you do infrastructure investment spending. So the short answer to your question is that it all depends on what the exact nature of the package will be. There's also been talk about a payroll tax cut. There's also been some discussion about, do we need more support of small businesses? How can households otherwise be supported? Do we need to change it from paying people for being unemployed to instead paying people for taking a job? So this debate is ongoing. It has been said and talked about that we will here in July, after recess, have more discussions in Congress about it. But this is extremely important for investors, because if there is not more fiscal support coming, and if we do end up in a deadlock situation where we don't get another fiscal boost, then we could run into some serious issues, in particular solvency issues for the household sector.
Torsten, how about the aid for the state and local municipalities? We've heard many governors, led by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, state that they really need fiscal stimulus for the states to balance their budgets. Most states have a balanced budget amendment, and we're seeing forecasts of some multi-billion-dollar deficits for a lot of states.
That's right, Paul, and that's why this has also been a bullet point that there has been talk about, that this is something that's needed. So a very macroeconomic way of looking at this whole question is that if the unemployment rate is still 10% in December and going into next year, that just sets in motion a lot of different things that will require, therefore, more support. Local governments, household sector balance sheets, corporate sector balance sheets, on the particular small business sector balance sheets. So in that sense, this next few weeks become absolutely critical. The conversations around what will the nature and the design be of any future fiscal support, and will there any future fiscal support, will any support be coming along? That becomes very important for markets, because if not, let's say that we don't get more support to the household sector, and if the unemployment rate does end up being 10% by the end of the year, again, Congressional Budget Office is forecasting, that means that more people begin to fall behind on their payments, on their car loans, on their credit cards, on their mortgages. You will also see people fall behind on CMBS payments, and across the board, those, of course, increases in delinquency rates will begin to have consequence for credit, infrastructure, finance, and a lot of things across the board, in fixed income in particular.
If you believe that the Fed will not let this happen, and that Congress will also not let this happen, particularly in election year, then you have to start believing in MMT, right? Torsten, is there a problem there?
So that's true, and this is why, of course, one option here is that the Treasury just issues a lot more treasuries, and then the Federal Reserve just buys them, which is essentially what's happening today. The issue is that even from an MMT angle, the Treasury still needs to issue treasuries and then come to some agreement, meaning Congress and the White House, in terms of how the money should be spent. And what we're debating is really this issue of how should the money be spent. We're not really debating whether the money is available. This, of course, is a very important debate in many other countries. But in the U.S., it's almost assumed that, of course, we have another $1 trillion or $2 trillion for this. And if it is the case that they're going to spend it, then for markets, it does become very important for individual stocks, for individual things in credit and fixed income, exactly which balance sheets will get support and which will not.
Interesting. Torsten Slok, thank you so much for joining us. Torsten Slok, Chief Economist for Deutsche Bank Securities. Vani, I think it's really interesting here as we see some news of just, more cases flaring up in some really, really key economic markets, California, Florida, Texas. What the impact will be on the overall U.S. economy. It'd be very interesting to see how this plays out over the next several weeks and months.
Yeah, I mean, it's really distressing. If you see American Airlines saying that it's going to fill its flights to capacity, that must be because it cannot operate any other way. It just doesn't see a way to profitability by having half-full planes. So it's decided, well, we're going to fill the planes, and if you don't want to travel, we'll let you know just a little bit in advance and you can rebook for another flight. But, Paul, I don't even see how that works. So companies are obviously trying to find all sorts of ways of managing around this. They wanted to stay open. The question is, will they even be able to? Clearly, Texas's taverns haven't been able to stay open. They've now been closed officially. Let's get some more headlines now on the virus and war from Nathan Hager at our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C.
Now, the latest headline just crossed as a red sticky on the Bloomberg terminal, Vani. Florida has reported a new record in one-day infections, more than 8,900 new COVID-19 cases, an increase of 7.8%. As you mentioned, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has begun dialing back his state's reopening, ordering bars to close today. Restaurants will have to open at 50% capacity starting Monday. Austin Mayor Steve Adler says Texas should have taken more precautions as it reopened.
The community, when you open up an economy, has to couple that with religiously wearing face masks and religiously maintaining social distancing.
As the surge continues, the White House Coronavirus Task Force holds its first briefing in 2 months later today. President Trump won't be there. As Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter reports, the White House has been mostly downplaying the spikes.
They have continued to sort of stress the idea that while the number of cases are going up, that hospitalizations and the death trend is still going down.
Today, the president will sign an executive order aimed at hiring in the federal workforce. The directive would emphasize job skills over college degrees. Presidential advisor and daughter Ivanka Trump says it'll diversify and improve the federal workspace. The head of Mexico City's Citizen Security Agency has been attacked. The capital city's mayor, Claudia Sheinbaum, says security chief Omar Garcia is out of danger and in the hospital. She says 2 police officers and a bystander were killed. 12 people have been detained. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
The world's financial different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
If you want to find out what the best laptop is for all those video conferences with your colleagues while sitting at your makeshift desk, you could ask an algorithm, or someone called Al, or Priya, or Lewis, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hi, it's Robin. Do you need some help finding the right tech?
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Go online to Shop Live at Curry's PC World.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When the world stopped, people in our local communities didn't. At the Co-op, we want to say thank you to all the local heroes. Daksha wanted to help the NHS, so she and her husband Parish cooked 50 meals for a hospital in Harrow. But they didn't stop there. They've set up the Community Response Kitchen, delivering to hospitals, schools and homeless shelters across London. Now they're delivering between 1,000 and 3,000 meals every day, and they've achieved all this with no funding, just the support of local businesses and local people. To Daksha and Paresh and all the local heroes that keep our communities going, the Co-op says thank you.
Enjoy peace of mind with Ford. Relax and think about 3 months deferred payment on a new vehicle. Visualize an additional 3 months cash back. Breathe deeply and let 0% APR representative on selected vehicles wash over you. That's peace of mind from Ford. Current promotion ends 30th of June. Search Ford Peace of Mind for details.
Only available with Ford credit on selected finance plans. Exclusions and deposit restrictions may apply.
Want to get all your college sports news in one place? Turn on the Yahoo Sports College podcast to hear experts Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty, and Pete Thamel break down the latest NCAA stories from the football field to the basketball court and beyond.
I think they should do a video of him running to Heritage Hall and front flipping in. Remember that famous front flip in the end zone that he did? Wasn't he the one who made that popular?
I think he was.
I think he was, yeah.
Search Yahoo College Sports Podcast on TuneIn to listen.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down, treasuries are up as resurgence in new virus infections began halting progress on reopening the American economy. We check the markets every 15 minutes. The S&P is down 1.8%, down 56. The Dow's down 2.1%, down 548. And the Nasdaq's down 2%, down 200. The 10-year is up 12.30 seconds. The yield 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 2.1% at $37.90 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.4% at $17.62.80 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.16. The dollar 12.05, and the British pound $1.23.33. You can waltz across Texas, but you can't stop in a bar to have a Lone Star beer. Texas must close bars there at noon today under an order from Governor Greg Abbott after the positive test rate surpassed 11%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
And it is Texas that we go to now for a Bloomberg Opinion piece called COVID-19 Gives Texas a Reality Check. It's written by our own Timothy O'Brien, senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, and of course a huge career before that. This is just what he's doing right now. Tim, your column is fantastic. You talked to us about the Texas Medical Center, which I'll get to expound upon in a moment. But first of all, is there a dereliction of duty on the part of Governor Greg Abbott right now? Is this his fault? Is it the hubris of Texas residents that places in Texas are being overwhelmed? I mean, when you take us through the timeline, you start in March 19th when New York was already shut down. Texas only had 306 cases then.
Right. I think, Vonnie, it would be unfair and too easy to put, the fallout from a pandemic like this on the shoulders of any one person. But certainly, at a minimum, Greg Abbott bears a lot of blame at this point, frankly. I think he's had a scattered approach through the governor's house in Texas to taking practical measures that would have helped ensure the safety of most Texans. We don't know. Obviously, at this point, there are no silver bullet approaches to battling back against COVID-19 until we have a vaccine. But there are practical measures that people can take, that states can take, and that the federal government can take that have been really spottily applied. And they're the basic things. Washing your hands, maintaining social distance, contact tracing, and of course, mask wearing. And I think masks have been a useful symbol in Texas for some of the problems there, because you had mayors across the state asking Greg Abbott to impose a law requiring that masks be worn, and he wouldn't do it. He gave guidance that people should do it, but he left it up to Texans themselves to decide whether or not they should wear masks. And that ended up being spottily applied. The same thing has happened around business openings. Early on, Abbott put it in order to lock down businesses across the state. But within about, I think, 5 weeks or so of the pandemic bursting into view, he began easing those lockdowns. Some people said too prematurely, and now he's backtracking.
All right, so Tim, you talk about the spotty applications on a statewide basis for precaution measures and responses to the pandemic. That kind of brings me back to something I still don't have a clear picture of. There does not appear to be any federal efforts to combat the pandemic in terms of laying out some regulations and how this should work at a federal level. Should there be, have there historically been in these types of situations? Has the Trump administration kind of not fulfilled its duty?
Oh, I don't think the Trump administration has fulfilled its duty at all here, Paul, and I think that's where I think first and foremost criticism has to reside. All of the governors across the country, regardless of party, have had to fend for themselves essentially during this crisis because the federal government has not stepped in and done important things like playing coordinating roles around the supply of PPE and testing equipment to the various states. The states have been left to compete against one another and come up with their own policies because the federal government isn't playing a very necessary coordinating role, which it's always done during disasters that are even localized, like, for example, hurricanes. You see FEMA and the federal government play a role intervening and coordinating the rescue. The Trump administration has totally given up its responsibility for playing a meaningful role in this crisis. And again, that's not an ideological or partisan observation. It's just an observation of the facts. So yes, I agree with you. I think it first has to start with where is the federal government. Even in that vacuum, some states have been more proactive than others in terms of taking this on. And there are some useful comparisons now among the various governors about approaches that have worked and haven't.
Yeah, I mean, the Trump administration could also have gone the regulation route, directing agencies to issue regulations which might have shut down parts of the economy as well. So there are plenty of things that the administration could have done legally and without having to jump through hoops and get Congress involved either. Tim, what happens next? I mean, we saw a massive spike in Florida numbers again today. You know, people are saying maybe it's younger people and maybe that will have an impact, but it's terrifying. This virus isn't going away. Fauci even said during the week that, you know, that the summer isn't helping. A lot of people thought that would help because lung diseases tend not to spread as fast in summer, but they're just the diseases we know, right? We don't know anything about coronavirus and it's not slowing down.
Right. I mean, I think, Vani, that was, you know, based on our understanding of how the flu operates. Typically, the flu season comes in colder months, and there was an anticipation that the summer would give help to folks battling the coronavirus. You know, what we've learned now is that COVID-19 is a particularly fierce virus. It mutates, it adapts, it appears to be resistant to warm weather. But the things that we do know that defeat it are, again, things like masks and social distancing. Scientists now have reached, I think, some sort of joint views that you're safer outside than you are indoors. It doesn't last on surfaces as long as people might have thought it did, but it does get communicated to people through close contact, often through the mouth, and whether it's talking, singing, etc. When we have practical information like this, there are steps we can do, steps we can take to battle back, like closing bars, which Texas just decided to do again today, but it has left its taverns open. And again, I think these are practical responses that have become politicized because of the current political environment we're in, which is unfortunate because it's leaving public safety in the lurch.
Yeah, that's kind of where I want to go, Tim, maybe 30 seconds. Are you surprised at the level of politicization here? Because we do not see that really in other parts of the world at all.
No, I mean, I think the United States is facing a reckoning right now. We have a very immature and destructive political dialogue that doesn't allow us to reach solutions, and we are politicizing things that simply shouldn't be politicized because we've gone through years now of this idea of sort of war on objective reality and facts that makes it hard for people to trust one another and reach consensus.
Yeah, it's just so odd. I mean, I suppose the closest you would come to it in the world is Britain's response as well. And I mean, Boris Johnson himself had the virus and it was very dangerous and he ended up in hospital. He had one of the worst cases of the virus and it still didn't really change how he handled the affair. Tim,
another close comparison is Romper Room. Funny. Yeah.
We remember that.
Tim, thank you so much. Tim O'Brien is a senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. I would urge everybody to have a look at his column today. It's fantastic. And you know, that opening paragraph or two about the Texas Medical Center, Paul, it would send shivers down your spine.
Yeah, it really does, and it's interesting. So Tim has a great column on Texas. His colleague from Bloomberg Opinion, Joe Nacero, also has a great column out today about Florida, and maybe a little bit different take. So good comparing those two columns there, two states thinking about how to deal with this surge in pandemic. So right now, we are just going to go down to Washington, D.C. We're going to get world and national headlines from, actually right now.
At the start of every day.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
My name is Danya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way to ensure that there was a financial incentive for be able to get paid for K to go there, if that makes sense. But it's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Ronnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession. The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Ronnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, we have another great hour coming up for you. We're going to dive into the banks and their stress test in a few moments with Alison Williams. We'll be talking to Lauren Sauer from Johns Hopkins University, and we'll have munis in focus as it's a tough time for counties, states and municipalities across the country. Let's get now a Bloomberg Business Flash from Greg Jarrett.
Well, thank you, Vonnie. The S&P has extended its weekly loss toward 2%. That as the Texas governors we've been talking about rolled back some reopening measures, including ordering the closing of bars. Data shows consumer spending surged by a record in May as Americans spent relief payments, though income slumped. Big banks slid after the Federal Reserve capped dividends and banned buybacks through September. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is down 1.8%, down 57. The Dow's down 2.2%, down 565. And the NASDAQ is down over 2%, down 202. The 10-year is up 13.30 seconds. The yield is 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.8% at 38.02 a barrel, while COMEX gold is down 0.25% at 17.6660 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.30, the euro is $1.12.02, and the British pound $1.23.19. Would you be offended if I said that new shirt looks kind of Yeezy? Kanye West's Yeezy fashion label is coming to Gap. The rapper and designer is teaming with Gap on a new line of apparel for men, women, and kids called Yeezy Gap. Let me take a look at Gap stocks right now. The Gap is up 3.2%. That is 31%, up $3.21. I misread that, 31%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Paul and Vonnie.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Big day for the small cap, for the Russell Index. Let's bring in Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson with the details. Dave, what's going on there?
Well, you've got the annual reconstitution, as it's called, of the Russell indexes after the close of trading. Basically, an overhaul. You see stocks move from the growth to the value category. You see stocks move from the Russell 2000 for smaller companies to the Russell 1000 for larger companies and vice versa. There's going to be a lot of shifting and a lot of trading late in the day. For the moment, we can see that the smaller companies are down more than the larger ones. The Russell 2000 lower by 2.3%, while the S&P 500 is down 1.8%. Steepest drop in the Russell at the moment belongs to Ideanomics. The ticker there, IDEX, the maker of electric vehicles, has fallen about 31%. Ideanomics was the subject of critical tweets by short-selling research firm Hindenburg Research, which put out a report yesterday. And Soliton, ticker SOLY, also down about 31%. The maker of tattoo removal equipment sold $35 million of stock. And Translate Bio, ticker TBIO, is down 19%. The developer of a COVID-19 vaccine sold $275 million of shares for itself and for the Shire unit of Japan's Takeda Pharmaceutical. The Russell's biggest gain by far belongs to MDC Partners, ticker MDCA. The marketing company has soared 110% after receiving a takeover offer from Stagwell Media. And Big Lots, ticker BIG, is up 26.5%. The closeout retailer said second quarter earnings will be at least $2.50 a share. That's more than triple analyst average estimate in the Bloomberg survey. And sales at stores open more than a year are up by a percentage in the mid to high 20s.
Dave Wilson, thank you. That is Dave Wilson there. Check out his chart of the day as well, and always look for his stories at NI Wilson on the Bloomberg. Let's concentrate on one of those sectors now, the banks. The KBW Bank Index down 5.5% right now. Let's bring in Alison Williams, Senior Banks, Asset Managers and Payment Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. So we had the bank stress test. We also had a little bit of a relaxation of some of the Volcker rule provisions, Alison. Banks, though, not doing well today. Is this because their dividends are being capped?
So the dividend cap, I don't think should be a surprise. In fact, I think, for the most part, the takeaways should be in line with what people expected. The ongoing scrutiny of the banks, there's a 3-quarter cap on dividends. There's the buyback pause. I think most investors expected that without a mandate by regulators. There's another metric where they're going to look at dividends as a ratio to the prior year earnings. I think the one bank in my coverage universe that screens poorly on that is Wells Fargo, and we, along with most, expected a dividend cut. We might get the cut there sooner than expected. We could get that as soon as Monday versus later. The other bank within my universe that's a focus is Goldman Sachs. So Wells Fargo screens well on excess capital, but their income is a problem. Goldman, it's the opposite. So their capital, the capital ratio that we're expecting now, based on the stress test results, might be a little bit higher than previously anticipated. We won't know exactly until Monday. But they have the income cushion they have some flexibility around that to sort of improve what their capital ratio is going to be by the time this rule is implemented, so they should be fine. For the broader bank takeaway, the banks are all going to have to basically resubmit their plans. The results came out much more negative under a COVID overlay, which was significantly more stressful than the basic test that's governing capital requirements at the moment. And so the negative for investors is that there will be ongoing uncertainty related to dividends. So not just some of the banks that I talked about, but across all banks. But I don't think that should be a surprise to people. We're in an uncertain environment. And so it shouldn't be surprising that the regulators are going to try to keep their options open.
Alison, it was a little bit of a surprise to me in the sense that, I had heard from a lot of folks, that the banks relative to 2008 going into that crisis were in much, much better financial shape, much better balance sheets, much better on the reserve front. Is this just the Federal Reserve acting out of what the term is abundance of caution here for the near term?
I think you're right on all those points, Paul. So, we are in an unprecedented downturn. And when we look at some of the COVID overlays in some of the U and W-shaped scenarios, we have losses that are, perhaps 30 to 60% higher than those used in the stress test. That's basically setting requirements for banks. And now keep in mind that, to your point, that the banks have very healthy levels to capital. I talked about Goldman, but the bar is so much higher than where it was before, and they're basically close to meeting that. The other consideration is just the fact that the banks have been, the solution to this crisis, right? So the previous crisis, they were the problem. Now they're the solution. And I think that regulators want to make sure that they can continue to be the solution. So unlike the last crisis where the question was, do these banks have enough capital? The focus right now of, current regulators and former regulators is that, we want to make sure that capital is there and being used to support the economy. And I think some of the thinking is, by some of these regulators, is just to err on the side of caution. But keep in mind, dividends are a small percentage. Wells Fargo is a company that had sort of a higher payout ratio, and I think that's why they're more at risk. But for the most part, all the capital return that we've seen in the several years, about 70% of that has been from buybacks, and buybacks are paused. The banks stopped those, and I wouldn't expect those to return this year.
Allison William, thank you so much for that. We always appreciate your perspective. One of the top banks analysts on Wall Street, not just at Bloomberg Intelligence, but before that at Morgan Stanley Investment Management. She's been covering these banks for a long time. Always appreciate her perspective. Allison Williams, Senior Analyst, Global Investment Banks and Asset Management for Bloomberg Intelligence. Interesting, Vonnie, these bank stocks, taking it on the chin, not just today, but this year. And we heard earlier in the show, it's maybe if you're a value investor, there might be some opportunities there. But I think, again, a lot of people are looking at the interest rate environment that is lower for longer, and it's just really tough to make a bull case there. But we always appreciate Allison's comments. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, watching fast-moving headlines on the coronavirus surge, Florida has reported a new record one-day increase in COVID-19 infections, up 7.8% on the day. Harris County, Texas, which includes Houston, is going to declare a level 1 emergency. That's according to sources. That's the equivalent of a stay-at-home recommendation for the Houston area. And a local TV station reports the health director for Metro San Antonio is resigning amid the pandemic. All this as Texas Governor Greg Abbott has made his state the first in the country to begin reversing its reopening. He's issued an executive order ordering bars across the state to close today and restaurants to limit capacity to 50% starting Monday.
What states need to do is really start reversing some of this. They opened too fast. They opened up against where the data and evidence was, and they really need to start making some reversals.
That's Dr. Ashish Jha with the Harvard Global Health Initiative. For his part, Joe Biden says he would insist people wear masks in public to stop the spread. The presumptive Democratic nominee tells KDKA television he would use executive power to encourage it.
I would do everything possible to make it required that people had to wear masks in public.
The Trump administration has reportedly frozen funding intended to help people in Hong Kong evade surveillance by the Chinese government. According to a report in Time magazine, the freeze came June 9th as Michael Pack was confirmed to lead the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which includes Radio Free Asia. He reportedly wanted to freeze hiring and contracts, a move that affected about $2 million in contracts directly benefiting Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Nathan Hager.
Business and finance have always held surprises, but this is brand new.
The move risks fueling more demonstrations, and Stokes' concern that essential freedoms will be curbed.
Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
Chinese lawmakers approved national security legislation.
Expert navigation through uncharted territory.
Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
It's a stock market driver.
Now they're starting to see a little bit of panic from policymakers.
It's a global political force.
How will this epidemic reshape big tech and its relationship with Washington?
It's a virus.
This coronavirus is a global pandemic.
Is there a safe haven?
And the facts matter.
The situation is so bad because of the virus that is simply unavoidable.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find better solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Friday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
If you want to find out what the best laptop is for all those video conferences with your colleagues while sitting at your makeshift desk, you could ask an algorithm, or someone called Al, or Miguel, or Haley, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hey, you're chatting to Robin here on Shop Live.
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Go online to Shop Live at Curry's PC World.
It could be a first-timer, or a long-timer, or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are lower after the U.S. set a record the day before for new COVID-19 cases, forcing Texas to pump the brakes on its moves to reopen the economy. The governor ordered bars to close there, plus caps on restaurant capacity and limits on outdoor activity attendance, which halts one of the most popular summer activities in the state, tubing on the rivers in the hill country, an activity many vendors there and communities rely on for annual income. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg. S&P is down 1.8%, down 54. The Dow's down 2.2%, down 555. And the Nasdaq's down 1.7%, down 170. The 10-year's up 13.30 seconds. The yield 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.8% at 38.03 a barrel. COMEX gold's now up 0.1% at 17.7340 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.21. The euro's $1.1204. The British pound $1.2323. Blackstone is more than 30 days delinquent on $273.7 million of debt tied to a portfolio of business hotels, a sign that large real estate investors are considering walking away from properties in the pandemic economy. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Now on Bloomberg Markets, Munis in Focus.
Focus on Munis is brought to you by Build America Mutual. When the market is volatile, BAM provides stability. BAM insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable rating. Ask your broker about BAM insured municipal bonds. Well, we're going to talk about a topic here on the municipal space with our good friend Eric Kazatsky. Eric is the municipal bond strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. And Eric, I know you put out some research recently on an area of the municipal bond market which is really fascinating to me, and that is a taxable municipal market. I've been a long-time municipal investor, Eric, but I do it for the triple tax-free aspect of it. Talk to me about the taxable space.
Sure. Well, good morning, first of all, and thanks for having me again. The taxable muni space has really been growing in importance in the last few years, especially like 2019 and most of this year really made a lot of headway as far as issuance that has come. And what's interesting about taxable munis, if you can sort of remember back to 2010, there was a huge Build America bond program. That's really when they started gaining traction with investors. You know, while that program is not around anymore, the taxable muni market has really become more important now because how low the rates are for exempts. So on a relative value basis, they're making more sense. This is also coupled with the fact that there's so much issuance going on in the taxable muni space right now. This really has to do with what happened in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where we took away the ability for issuers to advance refund their debt. And I think you and I have talked before that what that essentially means is telling a homeowner they can't refinance their mortgage anymore. Really, they held their hands behind their back. So using taxable munis gives them another way to sort of eke savings out of some of these older bond deals.
Well, so, Eric, taxable debt is almost 30% of 2020 muni issuance so far. Where should you look for some, attractive taxable debt?
You know, on a ratio basis and also looking at spreads over other corporate debt, taxable munis are making a lot of sense. So when you speak about attractiveness, this is certainly an area we could point to. We've had some spread tightening in the last couple of weeks, but when you plot them against taxable equivalent yields for, as Paul said, those triple tax exempt munis, or also, the yields for AA, single A corporate debt, they look a lot better. And we can think that the technicals are really going to be supportive of performance over the next several months.
Hey, Eric, there's been a lot of talk about another fiscal stimulus bill. This one may have some infrastructure. What does that mean for the municipal bond market? How are municipal bond investors thinking about this next round of fiscal stimulus?
Well, first of all, you have to think of infrastructure and the fact that we've had so many false starts given trying to get like a federal infrastructure plan going. If you talk to a lot of people in the muni space, they're always welcome to issuance, right? We're a supply-driven market. But at the end of the day, states and localities, they're hurting. They're sitting around waiting for, the federal government to act and, pass the next phase of stimulus so they can help balance their budgets and really figure out where they need to go, from a planning standpoint, whether they need to raise revenues or cut more expenses. And that's the big question mark. So from a credit analysis standpoint, I think that needs to be done first before infrastructure. Now, that said, if infrastructure does gain traction here, there are some interesting notes that were put in the proposal that would affect the muni market, and one of those is a return of the ability to advance for funds. We put out a note last week and just said that, while economically it still might make sense for issuers to take advantage of that, taxable munis have really taken their place in the last several years, and, it would be interesting to see if issuers would actually return to using that method of refinancing or not.
How many cities are we seeing similar dynamics to what we're seeing in New York, where you have protesters outside City Hall and they say they're going to stay there until the end of the summer and until a budget is agreed upon, and they're also, protesting for less police funding, but the overall protest is basically about the budget?
Just doing my cursory Twitter scans on a daily basis, it seems like that activity is still going on, and more on the social justice front. Although it's not as televised as it was, obviously, a couple weeks ago when it was, everything in the news was focusing on that. I think that, the continued ability for, these cities to try and figure out how they fund first responders is going to take an interesting dynamic, but, I don't think anything's directly going to impact the muni market from that as of yet.
So interesting. So how critical is it for these state municipalities to get fiscal stimulus right here from your perspective?
Vitally important. The headlines seem to get worse every day as far as what the actual budget deficits are growing to in a lot of these states, big ones. Not just, states like Oklahoma. I mean, it's California, it's Florida, it's New York. But on top of that, you're also seeing new headlines talking about massive furloughs and job cuts in these states because they don't know what they're dealing with as far as lost revenues. And, that right there, if they don't know what they're getting from the federal government to figure out how to fill the lost bucket, they have an impossible time planning on going forward. So they're left with very hard choices.
Yes, and, there's so much partisanship as well between the states and the federal government right now. I mean, we all know if you're not a governor that appeals to President Trump, you don't get a lot of airtime or a lot of, there's a lot of partisanship, let's just put it that way. Eric Kozatsky, Municipal Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, thank you. And it is fascinating, Paul, that it's going to be the second year in a row now where taxables will outperform tax exempts unless there's some kind of, something changes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic part of what was the sleepy kind of municipal tax exempt market. So getting a lot of supply and a lot of demand.
Exactly. Just another headline out of Arizona. Health authorities reporting 3,056 new cases in the last 24 hours. That's a 5.1% increase from the previous day.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks falling with the Dow dropping more than 500 points on a resurgence in new coronavirus infections. And that's leading some governors to reverse plans to reopen their states. Consumer spending surged by a record in May. Household outlays rose 8.2% from the prior month, the sharpest increase in more than 6 decades worth of data. The figures signal that the recovery in consumption got off to a solid start as many businesses reopened. Kanye West's Yeezy fashion label is coming to Gap. The rapper and designer is teaming up with Gap on a new line of apparel for men, women, and kids called Yeezy Gap. Products are expected to debut in stores and online next year. And Slack Technologies has joined Twitter, Facebook, and other Silicon Valley companies in allowing its 2,000 global employees to work remotely indefinitely. The workplace communication software company previously said it planned to keep offices closed until at least September. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience, an ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of financial experts.
He's a former president of the European Central Bank.
Your Global Financial Warriors is a classic textbook.
A lot of political experts.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what's the thing that he's not doing that he should do?
And lucky for you, we know a lot of science experts, too.
You talked about those reagents which are necessary for the testing. It's also the behavioral psychological approach.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. This July 4th, tune in to the boss.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the? Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million Lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the NFL.
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to speak with Lauren Sauer, Johns Hopkins University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine, get her thoughts on the surging COVID spread in certain parts of the country. Plus, Josh Wingrove, Bloomberg White House correspondent, get his thoughts on President Trump apparently ignoring the pandemic and the lack of a federal response. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, investors are not ignoring the pandemic. Stocks are down, treasuries are up. This because of the resurgence in new infections and the halting of progress on reopening the American economy as exemplified in Texas, where they've shut down the bars, limiting people who can go into restaurants, and also cutting down on outdoor activities. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is down 1.8%, down 55. The Dow's down 2.2%, down 566. And the NASDAQ is down 1.7%, down 166. The 10-year is up 13.30 seconds, the yield 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude's taking a hit, too. It's down 1.75%, down 38, at 38.05 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% now at 17.74.90 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.21. The euro, $1.1209, and the British pound, $1.2328. Boeing and federal regulators are preparing to hold a critical set of test flights on the 737 MAX early next week, which would mark a milestone in its return to service after being grounded for more than 15 months now. Boeing is down 2.4%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, plenty of new headlines on the coronavirus in the heartland and in some other states like Arizona and Texas this morning. Arizona virus cases jumping 5.4% over the 7 days. The previous 7-day average was about half of that. Let's bring in someone who knows a lot about this now. Lauren Sauer is Johns Hopkins University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine. So, Professor Sauer, how concerned should we be with certain counties in Texas saying that they're overwhelmed at this point?
I think we have every right to be concerned, and I think that's reflected in the governor rolling back some of those reopening measures. I mean, you know, there is some talk of these increased testing numbers just being an artifact of the increased availability of tests, but we're still hearing plenty of reports that people can't get tests. The tests are still a challenge, and we're still seeing a really high positivity rate as the hospitals start to surge. And, you know, you see things like Texas Children taking adult patients to manage some of that surge. I think we know it's real that we're seeing a massive increase in cases, and it's very worrying.
So, Dr. Sauer, from the medical community perspective, are we in any better shape to deal with this surge than we were maybe just a few months ago when New York and New Jersey and the Northeast was hit?
I think we have a few more tools in our toolkit. We have some therapeutics that are looking very promising. So once the patient is in the hospital, we have some improved ability to manage those patients. We know a lot more about the virus and how it sort of interacts in the body and how it impacts the patient. That being said, these therapeutics and this medical management doesn't keep patients out of the hospital. So we have to go back to those tried and true measures, you know, that physical distancing, staying home if you don't need to go out, reducing, you know, the flow of people out in public and reducing large gatherings, and then continuing to use that face covering whenever you do have to be out. So I think we have made some improvements. That being said, simply throwing the switch and reopening is going to put us very close to back where we started again.
Yeah, I mean, what would happen if everyone just stayed in place for 2 weeks? We know that the COVID cases in New York, just that headline coming in now, they rose 0.2%, which was in line with the previous 0.2% 7-day average. And that's because New Yorkers just went home and stayed there for the most part. If everybody in the country literally spent 2 weeks at home, would this virus be gone?
I don't think it'd be gone. I think, you know, you still have your essential workers. You still have people coming and going from healthcare and having healthcare needs and other, you know, day-to-day needs. But we would see a reduction in cases, just like we did the last time we implemented these more sort of strict measures. We are working really hard on development of a vaccine and development of improvement of therapeutics that can be given in the outpatient space. So we have a lot of options that are going to be coming on board in the next year or so here, but until we get to that time, we still are going to have to limit that outside interaction.
So, Professor Sauer, as we think about some of the things that I think a lot of people would like to do in terms of behavior, i.e., safe distancing, wearing a mask, limiting exposure in large groups. I mean, that really is the primary way today. We don't have therapeutics. We don't have a vaccine. That is really the best way to kind of bend the curve here in these new states, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And, I think that in public health, we've always said that as we start to reopen, we have to be willing to pull back on some of those measures if we see surges in cases. So, right. There's this sort of hierarchy where it's like staying home is the best. If you have to go out, avoiding large crowds is better than being in large crowds. If you have to be in a crowd, being outside is better than being inside. So we have this sort of basic understanding of where the lowest risk is and how that risk starts to creep back in, and the best we can do to stay on the lower end of that risk stratification, all the better.
What's the solution that everybody is hoping for? So we're obviously waiting on antibody tests to be better. We're obviously waiting on testing in general to be better. We're hoping for vaccines. We're still not sure if the initial vaccines will be good. Is there any hope at all that this virus just mutates itself out of existence?
I think you can always hope that. We are seeing data that says that there's not a lot of mutation in this virus. A lot of people with much more virology expertise than me are working very hard on that. But I think for now, our targets are vaccine and outpatient therapeutics, those things that are low cost, things that can be delivered outside of the hospital to reduce the severity of illness. That's where our targets are.
Lauren Sauer, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts. Always, we're such beneficiaries of having the good, smart people at Johns Hopkins available to us. Lauren Sauer is the assistant professor of emergency medicine at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Also, we'll note that the Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies as well. So, Vani, I think the story here, it sounds to me as we're listening to Professor Sauer, it's kind of the story we've heard now for months. We know what to do. We know what bends the curve here in terms of behavior. It's just having that conviction to get it done. And the folks in New York and the metro area certainly showed that conviction. Now it's time for some other folks in other parts of the country to do the same. Yeah, and I mean, you'll end up doing it by force, if not by persuasion, it seems like in the end. So may as well start doing it early and, maybe avoid the worst of it. It's just such a difficult position to be in. And the worst part of it, Paul, is that if you're, particularly affected, you could end up living with very long-term effects, and we know that. So, that's just terrifying. Yeah, absolutely. So we will certainly follow up with that throughout the day. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, we're continuing to follow the coronavirus headlines, Paul, with a vengeance. It continues to surge in many of the states that were first to reopen during the pandemic. Texas is now the first state to begin to reverse that. Governor Greg Abbott is ordering bars to close today, restaurants to open at half capacity starting Monday. Harris County, which includes hard-hit Houston, is issuing a level 1 emergency, essentially meaning people are being asked to stay home. Arizona has reported a 5.4% jump in new cases, nearly double the previous 7-day average. Florida reported close to 9,000 new cases today, a one-day record. Several South Florida cities are requiring masks. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez says similar mandates like stay-at-home orders have worked.
We're hoping that the mask in public requirement has a similar effect because, frankly, we really don't want to have to go backwards and undo some of the openings and potentially reimpose a stay-at-home order.
The White House Coronavirus Task Force holds its first briefing in 2 months later today. The head of the Government Accountability Office is trying to make sure fraud and waste aren't part of the coronavirus stimulus. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Controller General Gene Dardaro pointed to still another planning failure, no aviation security plan for communicable diseases.
We recommended this in 2015. So far, there's not a plan because of bureaucratic wrangling about who's responsible for developing it. This virus was spread around the world through our air transportation system.
Dardero said Congress has to give agencies that send out government checks access to the master list of Social Security recipients who died. His own late mother was sent a check. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
And just in, the governor of Florida is suspending alcohol at bars. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. Can the world reopen?
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find better solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
Treats to pets. Shorts for sunny weekends.
to brighten up one British home at a time.
thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
This is a message from the government. Some businesses are now able to welcome back their employees and customers. To keep everyone safe, it's important you follow government guidance and make your workplace COVID secure. Businesses should carry out COVID-19 risk assessments, put in place hygiene procedures, and help staff and customers keep a safe distance. Talk to your employees, listen to their concerns, and if possible, help them to work from home. Every workplace is different, but by following this guidance, you can get back to business safely and play your part in managing the risk of infection. Visit gov.uk/working safely for more information. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
If you want to find out what the best smart tech is to keep an eye on your front door whilst out and about enjoying the sunshine, you could ask a machine, or someone called Mac, or Kai, or Rachel, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hi, it's Ali. Do you need some help finding the right tech?
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million Lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When the world stopped, people in our local communities didn't. At the Co-op, we want to say thank you to all the local heroes. Daksha wanted to help the NHS, so she and her husband Parish cooked 50 meals for a hospital in Harrow. But they didn't stop there. They've set up the Community Response Kitchen, delivering to hospitals, schools and homeless shelters across London. Now they're delivering between 1,000 and 3,000 meals every day, and they've achieved all this with no funding, just the support of local businesses and local people. To Daksha and Paresh and all the local heroes that keep our communities going, the Co-op says thank you.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P extended its weekly loss to more than 2% as the Texas governor rolled back some reopening measures, including ordering the closing of taverns. Florida reported a record number of new cases and shut down the sales of alcohol at bars. Data show consumer spending surged by a record in May as Americans spent relief payments, though incomes did slump. We check the markets every 15 minutes. The S&P is down 1.7%, down 51. The Dow continues to slide, down 2.2%, down 563, and the NASDAQ is down 1.4%, down 140. The 10-year is up 13.30 seconds. The yield is 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.7% at 38.07 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.5% at 17.78.80 per ounce. The dollar yen 107.20, the euro $1.12.11, and the British pound $1.23.32. Albertsons has fallen in its trading debut after the grocer's initial public offering raised just $800 million. The shares opened in New York at $15.50 after pricing at $16 each, below the targeted range of $18 to $20. And as we speak, it's currently at $16.08 per share. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Just scrolling through my Twitter feed in the break, I saw Maggie Haberman, reporter for the New York Times, tweeting out that POTUS has canceled his trip to Bedminster this weekend. That's per two people briefed. So I thought that was interesting segue to our next segment, talking about the federal response to the pandemic. Has it been sufficient? Has President Trump fulfilled the role that is required of him, or has he left it to the states? Josh Wingrove, Bloomberg White House correspondent, joins us. Josh, thanks so much for joining us here. What is the take within the Beltway as to, what President Trump and his administration, how they've chosen to handle, or quite frankly, not handle the pandemic, and thereby kind of putting it on the laps of the governors and local municipalities?
Well, the president, I guess the answer is different about who you talk to. The president is more or less trying to not acknowledge the spike that we've seen. And when he does, he attributes it to testing, which really doesn't tell the full story. Of course, today we've seen Florida and Texas re-close bars because of the alarming spikes that we've seen there. Florida, of course, was the state that the president has moved his convention to in August because he didn't want to have COVID restrictions. Now it's very much unclear whether that will be the case. But he essentially is just sort of waving the spike away, and they're pointing to other metrics like, for instance, declining mortality rates and declining average age. But we still are only getting some of the iceberg in terms of the total caseload, and it's clear that the virus is circulating very widely, in particular in about a dozen U.S. states. So this one isn't going away anytime soon. On the flip side, the coronavirus task force is going to brief today. This is the first time in 2 months that they've held a press briefing. Trump won't be there, and they're not doing it at the White House. So I think that gives you a sense of where things lie.
Yeah, so obviously any sort of I hope or last minute wish that there might be a federal effort to take the pressure off some states and counties, and also to force the states and counties to shut themselves down. That's not coming, is it, Josh?
No, I mean, the president has been keen to leave this to the governors, and in many cases, governors have been happy to take that. What they wanted, though, is more guidance, more support, and maybe, the president has also not done what other world leaders and even governors have done, which is model the behavior that they want folks to be doing. The president has never, for instance, worn a mask in public. The Vice President Pence has occasionally, and other officials have. But no, I don't think that they're going to be sort of seizing the moment. But it's tougher for Trump because early on, some of these worst outbreaks were in states that were Democratic run. So he had a bit of a fallback, in terms of the political lines that he could use. Now we're seeing outbreaks in particular in Republican-led states like Florida, Texas, and Arizona, all states that would add that polls have shown Trump tied or losing to Joe Biden in. So it's a trickier political calculus for him.
So, Josh, as I think about past natural disasters, there's obviously never been anything on this scale, but I think about hurricanes and things like that. We're all introduced in Hurricane Katrina to the term FEMA and what the FEMA folks do, and getting, trailers to people who need, housing and things like that. Should there have been a federal response to this pandemic?
I mean, there was. FEMA was involved in particular around supplies, so airlifting and helping companies get in, gloves, masks, gowns, that kind of thing. And the U.S. has made a lot of headway on that. Trump has focused a lot also on incentivizing production of ventilators. So the U.S. has made headway on that, too. That was a risk a few months ago. It's not as acute a risk right now, but FEMA has been sort of, on the back burner a little bit, and they really haven't been doing it. The CDC has been sort of sending in teams to states to become hotspots, but I think one open question is around that contact tracing. That is just a word meaning you call everyone who got sick. You call everyone they've been in touch with and tell them that person got sick. This is very hard to do, very labor intensive. That could have been a role potentially for the federal government to step in at. We haven't really seen that happen. The U.S. doesn't really have any substantial contact tracing, certainly nationally, but even on it's very ad hoc.
We just did a headline crossing the Bloomberg a few minutes ago that the EU is looking toward recommending a ban on entry to US travellers. This isn't going away anytime soon, and there will be, more and more coronavirus headlines throughout the summer and towards the fall. How does it impact the election, Josh? We've definitely seen a dent in the polls for the president, but in places like, certain areas of Texas and certain areas of Arizona, for example, where he did still have a very strong base, do those voters hold for the president?
It has been more than a dent. The big caveat here is that 4 months is an eternity in politics, so there's a long time in still the election. But if the election were accurate, accurate as they were in 2016, and Trump would still lose badly right now if the election were today. He's down something like 9 points in Florida. He's down a point within the margin of error in Texas. The Republicans are in absolute disaster zone if they lose Texas. So, it is bad. And you're right, the EU has those travel measures. Of course, the border with Canada remains closed. I can't see the Prime Minister in Canada, disclosure here, I'm Canadian. I can't see the Prime Minister in Canada, rushing to open that given the number of cases that are circulating. And even in the U.S., we're seeing some of these limits, including in New Jersey, which is asking people to isolate if they've come from hotspots like Arizona. Of course, the president, you mentioned the tweet that he's canceled his trip to New Jersey this weekend. He was in Arizona earlier this week. So if he'd gone, he would have been flouting that policy.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Fair, yeah.
Josh, just real quickly, 30 seconds or so. Is there any sense that President Trump can turn this narrative around, or is he and his administration kind of at the mercy of the path of this virus?
Yes, I think people are encouraging him. We've seen allies speak out more. He doesn't normally like that, but they're sort of urging him to change course. The president has still a profoundly loyal base. He thrives when he's able to get in front of crowds. Absolutely, this election is by no means over. He's still got a lot of enthusiasm in his camp, but there are allies around him urging him to change his approach for sure.
All right, Josh, thank you so much. That is Josh Wingrove there, White House reporter. And we had some Governor Cuomo headlines too on a call to reporters telling them that New York is calling Arizona, Texas and Florida to offer virus help, and that New York is in a position to provide equipment and staff to those states. And Paul, you have to wonder if you're, an emergency, doctor or, a nurse that's gone through this in New York, would you really be able to go to another state and start again, do the whole thing all over again?
Yeah, it just goes to those frontline workers are just unbelievable heroes. But it is consistent with what Andrew Cuomo said back months ago when we needed the help. When we come out of this, we will help you.
Yeah. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. At the start of every day, you can't predict.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we start to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to an algorithm? Or to someone called Al, or Jack, or Miguel, or Haley, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability. Mobile data charges may apply.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Staying current on college hoops starts here. On the Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We start again with the markets today. They are really off to a bad start here right now. I think because of the COVID-19 cases in Texas and Florida, places like that. But Abigail Doolittle will really take us through it.
A bad start indeed, David. There's certainly a very strong risk-off tone here on this Friday. And I believe you're correct. It absolutely has to do with this virus data that's worsening around the country, the sense that perhaps we are still in in the first wave of this virus, while it's over, or hopefully over here from a first wave perspective in New York, that the rest of the country is now catching up. These spikes that we're seeing that are causing Florida to say no alcohol, Houston closing its taverns. We also have these big spikes in Florida, Arizona, these hot spots. So that's weighing on the markets at this point. We had the S&P 500 down sharply. We also have crude oil down once again, down 1.9%. That, of course, is an economic commodity. So when it's down, it tells you that there's the fear of less demand, which would certainly happen if parts of the economy, the U.S. economy, perhaps don't go under lockdown, but some sort of shutdown, that could certainly dampen economic activity, demand from consumers, and the like. And energy really down in sympathy with oil, not surprisingly, making it a risk-off day. We do have bonds higher with the 10-year yield down about 5 basis points. David, what makes this so interesting, though, is over the last few weeks, it's felt like it's been risk-on because you've had that NASDAQ hitting all-time highs. That is not the case. Markets are actually onto this because the last couple of weeks have been risk off. The S&P 500 is down over that time period. Bonds are higher over that time period. The yen is higher over that time period. Trend shifts are often very difficult, very subtle to detect. But when you start to have a multi-week period that is moving toward, in this case, risk off, it may suggest that there will be more obvious catch up for stocks ahead, pointing to the idea that July could be a bit difficult, especially if the second quarter earnings report period turns out to be a bit more difficult. Stay tuned, but certainly a risk-off day within a risk-off week. And truthfully, David, at this point, much of June is risk-off itself. All of this on this worsening virus data here in the U.S.
Yeah. Just what we need is a difficult July. Well, thank you so much, nonetheless, to Abigail Doolittle. Well, markets were on their way back from those March lows, but now this COVID-19 virus, as we've been talking about, really has been resurging in at least several states. We turn now to David Hunt. He is the PGIM president and CEO. So, David, what do you make of this? There was a lot of talk about whether we were worried about a second wave and what it would do to the economy and the markets. I'm not sure we priced in fully that the first wave never quite left us.
No, I think it's a great point, David. We never really got to find out about the second wave. We're still very much in the middle of the first. To be honest, we're not surprised. We believe that the whole recovery is going to be much slower and much more uneven than most people believe, and certainly than's priced into the markets. I think having some of these sharp increases in cases is actually quite natural, and I think we will continue to have them and have hotspots and flare-ups as we go. What we've got to do is to decide that actually individual behavior needs to change. Far too many people think that when a state opens up that we can go back to behaving the way that we used to. And we are unfortunately in for a period where social distancing and masks are going to be the way we need to live for the foreseeable future. And I think that we need to learn to practice those in order to open up safely. So the net of all of that, David, is that we're going to have a very slow recovery. We are going to have, we think the economy will be smaller at the end of 2021 than it finished 2019. And markets are priced for a much sharper V-shaped recovery, which we don't think is likely. And so the risk-off trade that you're seeing today and in much of June is likely, we think, to continue through the summer.
So, David, this is a really important point because there was a time we thought maybe we'd be back to the size we were in 2019 by the first or second quarter of 2021. Then markets seem to be pricing in, as you say, by the end of 2021. You're saying that's overly optimistic as well. Do you have any sense of when we might get back there, recognizing the way is not going to be smooth to get there?
No, it's going to be quite uneven, and obviously it's very uncertain. The progress on the vaccine will have an enormous amount to do with confidence. And this is all going to be about confidence and individuals coming back to consume the way that they did and come together the way that they did. We believe that if we have kind of the normal path of this, that people are not going to be, particularly for many of the services businesses or travel, are going to be going back to the way they were for at least 18 months. And so for us, we're going to have depressed consumption and demand that will last well into 2021.
So, David, the government has already done an awful lot, both on the monetary and the fiscal side. There's a lot of clamor now for it to do more. Does more need to be done? And if more is done, where does it need to be directed at to really make the biggest difference?
No, it's a great point, David. I think you have to give the Fed full marks for both the breadth and the power of what they've done to stabilize markets, and even the early stimulus packages. I think were largely on target, even if they weren't perfect. But more needs to be done, and it needs to be done in two areas. First is that we need to get more money into the hands of small businesses. The Triple P plan that was originally envisioned essentially was a very short-term program which aimed at trying to keep up employment and keep paychecks coming. We now realize that this is going to be a much longer problem, and businesses are going to need to be bridged for a far longer period of time if this is going to work. And so we need a new program that is far more flexible and is more long-term for small business. And then secondly, David, you and I have talked about this before, states, cities, and municipalities are headed for a world of pain. There are going to be very significant drops in the revenues that they have from all kinds of different taxes. And that's going to mean that they often have to cut services unless we have another way out for them. And these services are what we care so much about now. They're EMS, they're healthcare, they're education, they're firefighters. And so you've already started to see this. You saw the mayor of New York come out talking about possible cuts just this week. We need a federal program that actually will stabilize, particularly the cities and municipalities as we go through this. And I realize this is a politically difficult thing to do, but I'm just arguing from a purely economic, pragmatic point of view. We cannot have major unemployment happening in our states, cities, and municipalities.
David, you and I have talked in the past about the savings problem for retirement in this country, frankly, around the world. This is making it far worse. We're looking at zero or close to zero interest rates for a long time to come. Are we borrowing from the future to some extent for the present? We may need to do it in order to get us through this rough patch. But as a practical matter, are we going to have the capital necessary to really increase productivity to get growth going again?
Well, there's a lot in that, David, and I think you're really right to point it out. First, this is all extremely difficult on savers, and the entire lower for longer thesis, which has been true for the last decade, and we believe will be true going forward, means that savers are going to have an extremely rough time of it. That's going to mean that they save more. That's going to mean actually that consumption probably goes down. And so it becomes a bit self-reinforcing within the economy and keeps growth low. On the flip side of things, there's very little evidence that the low interest rates and certainly negative interest rates actually stimulates companies to invest. And so we're not really getting the benefit of it on the other side. And you're right to point out we need to do this to get us through this period. But longer term, we're going to need to come back to historic levels of productivity if we're going to have our current economy go back to its old levels of growth.
So finally, David, let's come to another topic that we've discussed a fair amount, and that is infrastructure. To what extent could infrastructure at this point, an investment in infrastructure, help us with some of that problem on future productivity? Or do we have to wait for that for later until we take care of the immediate crisis?
Well, we all have our wish list of silver linings to a crisis, and this one is mine, David. I would love it if finally the political stars would line up behind a major infrastructure initiative in this country. It's been well known for a decade that we are woefully underfunded on infrastructure, and that if you travel through the U.S., you begin to feel more and more like you're in a very poor country. But now we actually have, one, states and municipalities where a lot of this is needed need money, and two, we desperately actually need to put people to work. So maybe the political stars can line up across all three of those rationales, and we can finally get the support we need for a major infrastructure bill. And I would emphasize that this is not just a matter of money. This is actually more a matter of getting the right structures, the private-public partnerships in place so that we have projects that are ready to fund. There's actually a lot of private capital that is available and wants to fund infrastructure, particularly on the debt side, if we can get the right structures in place. So it's not just an allocation of money that we need, but we actually need a federal structure that helps to organize, share best practices, and force through many of the zoning and planning changes we need in order to get these big projects done.
And finally, David, you manage an awful lot of money on behalf of a lot of people who need that money over the long term. They want to make sure it's there and that it's increasing at the right rate over time. Give us some sense, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what's the level of anxiety among investors right now?
Well, it's very interesting, David. I would say I can tell within the first 10 minutes of a meeting with a CIO whether they were the CIO during the GFC or not. I think in general, most of the major pension funds around the world and other large pools of capital are still managed by people who had a lot of experience coming through that. And I can say there is no panic in that. They are taking their time. They're being very deliberate about how they want to rebalance back to this. And they're taking advantage of the fact that they can get into asset classes and into securities at prices they couldn't before. And so on the institutional side, I actually think that there's a good deal of stability and a nice long-term view. I worry more on the retail side, where we've had a lot of flight out of pretty much all assets and into money market funds. And I worry about the lack of being invested in the market, and that many people will have actually missed the bounce and will miss the bounce the next time by their actions. But on the institutional side, I've been very, very impressed, actually, at the disciplined and long-term nature of most investment decisions that I see right around the world.
Okay, David, thank you so much for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you with us. That's David Hunt. He's the president and CEO of PGIM. And we're going to have much more on this eventful week. That's on Wall Street Week, which will air this evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, here on Bloomberg. In the meantime, right here on Balance of Power, we're going to be talking with Claudia Song about possible future government stimulus and how it could be distributed. She's with the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Working from home.
What if the world listened more? Maybe it could become a better place. Because when we really listen, we're smart to notice things that don't sound quite right. They might not seem obvious at first, but listen closely and they stand out like a sore plum. And the more we listen, the more we learn. Our ears help us find belter solutions. And things can change from this to something a little more like this. The new Honda Jazz is a hybrid. Honda, the power of dreams.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are
ploughing on, boxing up goods and rolling them out, shipping kettles,
instruments to kids,
art for walls,
treats to pets, shorts for sunny weekends,
to brighten up one British home at a time.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Chantel or Raj or Fiona or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, it's Ali. What are you searching for?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the? Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won. Or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Should your kids go back to school? Ask Andrea. She's a teacher.
We're doing everything we can to keep the children safe and happy at school, which is why it's great that more of those who can are coming back. Not only for their education, but for their overall well-being too. It gives them a routine, helps develop their social skills, and they get to see their friends too.
If your child is eligible, they should return to school. The government is working towards getting all pupils back in September. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV show in the Division Series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there are unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Home alone or with housemates, stay home as much as possible. Try to allow only people you live with into your home. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home and isolate from housemates. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Really close to going out of business. They really, really need help, but everybody needs help too.
And there was the double whammy, if I can put it that way, of the pandemic, which disproportionately affected particularly Black and Hispanic communities, as well as Native Americans, by the way. So they got hit really hard with that in terms of the disease. And then they got hit with the unemployment because last hired, first fired, their unemployment rate, particularly among Blacks, went up. So the question is, can we do something more than just get money to them? Can we change the system in such a way that can actually perpetuate sort of a return toward equality?
Yes. And I want to amplify and actually point to, we have 3 crises that we have seen in the last few months. So I agree, the public health, the economic crisis, and we saw in the last month a very severe racial justice issue in the United States. And that added another level. And frankly, when you have stressed people to the brink in terms of their economic conditions, what they can do to support their families, you're putting the United States in a very difficult, a very bad place. And we saw one of many consequences of this. So, but all is not lost. There are absolutely things we can do. There are things that are based on research and evidence and past experience, right? So we can do this. And there's several things. One, right now, we absolutely have to shore up the safety net in the United States, and we have to stop playing politics with it. The unemployment insurance system is being pushed to a breaking point. We got to do that better. The payroll protection program, the loans that went to small businesses, that was an amazingly well-intended program. The administration of that program has been very problematic. And we know that now. We know that what these businesses need is not loans they're going to have to pay back. They need money. And it's really important that we keep those businesses. And state and local governments haven't gotten really any help so far, and they're getting crushed in terms of their budget. And we will pay for that. And we paid for that in the Great Recession for a very long time. Now, what you talked about, how minoritized groups are being even more hard hit, these numbers that we have, they're absolutely tragic. I mean, the job losses among blacks are higher than whites. They always are. In this recession, the job losses among Hispanics or Latinx workers, they're really even hard to look at. And we don't, in a lot of cases, have good data on Native Americans, but there's been a lot of focus and news coverage of what's happening among Native American communities. And again, like, they're getting hit with the public health crisis, the economic crisis, and they were in absolutely unexcusable place in terms of their financial security before this all got going. So we know how to make this better and even get to a better place in February, but if Congress and the administration doesn't really do something that's like good something, it will get worse. It's getting worse right now.
Claudia, it's always a treat to have you with us. Thank you so much for those contributions.
Yeah,
that is Claudia Sam, and she is from the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. Coming up here, trying to relaunch a major new auto model in the middle of a pandemic. We talk with Jim Farley. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Ford Motor. That's next on Balance Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. Ford Motor is launching a whole new version of its F-150 pickup. That has been, by the way, the most popular vehicle, not just truck, but vehicle in the United States for the last 43 years. I talked with its Chief Operating Officer, Jim Farley, earlier today about the challenges this major relaunch in the middle of a pandemic.
A challenge like we've never seen, but Ford always steps up. We're the first company to start making PPE of all the car companies. And look, the F-150 is the most popular vehicle in the United States. We make more vehicles in the U.S. than any other OEM by a large part. This is important for our economy as well, because the scale of F-150 at 1 million units a year is just huge. You know, we planned this product 4 or 5 years ago. We're finally getting our plants up to full production. It's been really challenging. In the second quarter, we were completely done. I mean, we had no factories open, but we used that time to prepare to bring people back, tens of thousands of people back. They're now in the factories. We're building out the current F-150, and we're building the prototypes for the new one that you've seen now.
How far back are you at this point? What percentage of capacity roughly are you running at?
We're just under 100% in North America. I think we're at 96%. We're still having some hiccups with part suppliers in Mexico. We're working through Chihuahua and Puebla. Some of the states in Mexico are still operating at 30 or 40% capacity. We use those parts even in our U.S. produced vehicles. But we're working through it. Air shipment, helicopters, we're doing everything we can to keep the factories going. Our team's been incredible. We have a factory in the middle of Chicago, downtown Chicago, and the team is working every day. And in fact, the playbook for our safety now, some of our teammates say the safest part of their life is coming to work at Ford.
Oh boy, that's a real tribute. So we're seeing some flare-ups now in the virus in some places like Florida, Arizona, Texas, California. Is that affecting your operations at Ford at this point at all?
Not yet, but we really are watching this carefully. We look at the infection data by location with all of our plants and all of our facilities every day. And we're always going to put our team safety first. So if we have to, stop operations, we will. We won't hesitate at all. But so far our playbook has worked really well, and it helped a lot to be in the PPE production business. We've had no issues with PPE availability. We have just tens of thousands of people back to work, and so it takes a lot of PPE to keep everyone safe.
With respect to the F-150 that you're launching here, it is, of course, it's terribly important. I think it's been the most popular vehicle in the United States for 43 years, is what I have read, actually. You also have had some competition recently from Ram, from Chevy. What are you doing in this new Ford F-150 to really fight that off?
Well, this is a big change for us. A lot of our competitors have upgraded their products. This is the first big upgrade for us in 5 or 6 years. Look, we're doing a lot. We have all new powertrains. We have a new hybrid, first in the market. It gets 700 miles on one tank. We have an onboard generator. A lot of our work teams have to buy these generators. They're very expensive, $10,000 plus. You now can get your F-150 to do that and not have any emissions on the job site and run it from your truck. We have a 12-inch screen, a full flat seat. We have a whole tailgate solution for customers so they can use it for, productivity. We're now adding over-the-air update, just like your Tesla, to improve the product over time, whether it's your voice control or new features like towing features. So it's a big change for us, and it comes at the right time.
When you talk about things like the generator, like the touchscreen, things like that, it points us back to the fact that the Ford F-Series has really been particularly important to the commercial sector. Certainly people buy it for home use, but a lot of people, these are contractors, people like that. Is that going to remain your sweet spot that you have to hold and defend?
It really is. Build Ford Tough is what Ford's all about. We're the most popular vehicle in the U.S., like you said, and we're only second to iPhone in terms of total revenue. This vehicle is really important for the U.S. economy as well. And our core customer is that work customer. They buy this as a tool. It has to last a long time and be durable and have all the new features for productivity, including great fuel economy and low cost of ownership. And that's where we excel. We're the #1 commercial brand in the U.S. and in Western Europe, not just the F-Series, but also our Transit van.
Are you seeing a longer-term change in demand? For example, you talk about the Transit van. We have a lot more home delivery of everything these days as we can't go out to places. Is there a shift in demand that you're seeing on the customer side?
We are. We're seeing a move to electric. A lot of our large customers are asking for full electric. In fact, we're going to be launching in the next 24 months a fully electric F-150 and a fully electric Transit van. And that's, I think, the first full line electric, offer out there. Yes, we're seeing more electric requirements. We're seeing the new technology requirements like over-the-air update. People are going to keep a truck for 10 years. They want it to get better every year. And vans are getting more popular for our customers because of the delivery service. We're seeing demand for transit go through the roof, frankly.
What are your expectations? I think you shipped something like 900,000 units of the F-Series last year. What are your expectations going forward? And particularly, I'm mindful of the fact you're selling this new vehicle into an economic recession. And a lot of the people who have been hit the hardest are the small businesses who are your commercial customers.
It was interesting. We have all of our data, connected car data we've been looking at during the pandemic. We can track the number of trips by location and how it's changing, and we saw a dramatic reduction. But frankly, the trips for commercial vehicles really didn't go down that much. A lot of our customers have been working through this pandemic. They're plumbers, electricians, construction workers. They've been busy. Now, no doubt about it, we're seeing the market down, and we're planning our business to be below pre-COVID industrial demand. So we see the industry coming down. That's how we're planning our business. We think that's prudent. We'd love it to be fantastic and strong like it was in January and December last year, but that's not what we're planning our business around. We think that the market will come down, but we think that having new, fresh products are really important. We have the new Bronco, the Mach-E Mustang, all-electric vehicle coming out in the next couple months, so we're still investing.
That was Jim Farley. He's the Chief Operating Officer of the Ford Motor Company. And right now, we're waiting for a live briefing by the White House Coronavirus Task Force. It's going to be coming from HHS, led by Vice President Pence. We'll bring you that when it occurs. In the meantime, let's talk about regulation and maybe more importantly, deregulation. Deregulation has been at the center of President Trump's plans for reigniting growth in the economies from the beginning, and it's been really turbocharged by the pandemic. Welcome now, Cass Sunstein. He is a Bloomberg opinion columnist. He is also a Harvard law professor. Professor Sunstein also served as the administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in the Obama White House. So welcome, Professor. It's great to have you with us. Most recently, we've seen what's happened with deregulation. As President Trump came in and said he wants to deregulate things, the courts in some instances said not so fast. Most recently with the so-called DACA cases, those children that were brought here without documentation but while they were still minors. Give us a sense of where that battle is between the Trump administration on the one hand and the courts on the other.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure to be here. So I think I'd back up a bit and say that there are environmental regulations and occupational safety and health regulations and food safety regulations. Some involve clean air. Some involve, daily life, such that before pandemic, if you went out, the likelihood that you'd die on the roads was lower than it would otherwise be because of automobile safety regulations. The Trump administration has dramatically slowed the flow of new regulations. It's succeeded in having the lowest uptick in regulations, for better or for worse, in the years that this has been collected. It's done much more modest work in eliminating existing regulations, notwithstanding all the noise. It's done significant work, but much less than a wholesale deregulation. With respect to the deregulation that has occurred, a lot of it's been struck down. So if you get rid of environmental regulation that prevents people from getting sick because the air's going to be cleaner given the regulation, the courts aren't going to say, okay, fine. They're going to require a reasoned justification and compliance with law. And there have been a kind of avalanche of legal losses for the Trump administration, not necessarily because they couldn't do what they've done, but because they did it in a way that was reckless and inadequately justified. And that brings us to the DACA case, where the majority said it wasn't quite deregulation. It was, in a way, eliminating deregulation. That is, the Obama administration's giving a right of children of illegal aliens to stay here for a couple of years. The Roberts Court concluded, you didn't really explain this very well. You just kind of said, here we go.
So, Professor Sunstein, for those of us not steeped in administrative law, why doesn't the president have the right to just come in and say, we're going to change the place? I mean, elections have consequences. He can appoint the people he wants. He can dismiss the people he wants. Why is it that the courts can say, no, I'm sorry, you have to go through these hoops?
Okay, that's great. And it really gets to fundamentals about liberty under law. So we have a bunch of administrative agencies. The president is in charge of them. There's the Department of Agriculture, and there's the Department of Transportation, there's the Environmental Protection Agency. The president is the boss of all these. But as our legal system has grown up over the last basically century, the agencies can't just say, we're going to have a new clean air regulation, and it's going to be much cleaner. Hooray. Or we're going to eliminate our food safety regulation, and it's going to be much easier for people to sell food. Hooray. You can't do that. You have to show that there's some justification in the law and in the science and in the economics that makes it make sense. So to be a little more concrete, suppose there's a Biden administration and it issues a greenhouse gas regulation on day one. You can't just do that. It has to be subject to a public comment process. It has to be consistent with the source of law, which is the Clean Air Act. And it has to be reasonable, meaning it can't say, we're going to eliminate cars in the United States that aren't electric unless there's some justification for that. And this is kind of like life when it's working well. In a company, you can't just say, we're going to go have a complete turnaround. You can maybe legally do that, but you can't do that and retain your job. You have to have some reasons for doing it.
Right. Thank you so very much, Professor Cass Sunstein. Great to have you with us. I'm afraid we're going to cut it a little bit short here because we're about to start the briefing here. That they've got a full house and we've got the 2-minute warning. Cass, are you still there?
I am.
Great. One last quick question. How will a Biden administration handle this, if in fact there is a Biden administration?
As Yogi Berra said, predictions are difficult, especially about the future. But if there's a professional team in there, there'll be a systematic effort to see what that the president's predecessor did, what the Trump did, is inconsistent with the policy preferences. And then there will be a sustained effort to make sure that the changes are made in a way that engages public comment, that partakes of science, and that deals with the relevant economics. It'll be very, if it's working well, it'll be very disciplined and very open to the public.
Okay. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate it, Cass. It's always great to have you on with us. Please come back again soon. That is Professor Cass Sunstein of Harvard. No, I'm now told once again we're not going to do that. Sorry, I'm getting some conflicting instructions here. I am a puppet, as you know, Cass. I don't actually get to make decisions here. But let's stand this up. Let me ask you the really big question.
Kind of it's behavioral economics 101 that you want to have a lot of surprises for people. So to change direction, you did that very well.
Keep them paying attention, exactly. And if you haven't bought it, you have to go buy Nudge, which Professor Sunstein wrote about behavioral economics. So let me ask you maybe the biggest question here. Why is the administrative process even constitutional? We only have 3 branches of government, I thought. This one isn't quite the Congress, isn't quite the executive branch. It certainly is not the judicial branch.
Well, at the founding, it was well understood that you have to have people working to implement the law under the president, and there's clear recognition in the Constitution itself that you're going to have departments. So the idea that you'd have entities that work under the president, it wasn't as if that was the majority view, that was the unanimous view. So the idea you'd have a State Department and a Treasury Department and the precursor to the Defense Department and more, that was like the idea that there's something you have to breathe, air.
Cass, we're going to go straight from Cass Sunstein to Vice President Pence, who is speaking with the White House Coronavirus Task Force at HHS.
Task Force, and I'm pleased to be joined by many members of the Task Force with us for this briefing. I want to thank Secretary Azar, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redfield of the CDC, as well as our Attorney General, Dr. Gerard of the U.S. Public Health Service, Dr. Hahn, and Seema Verma. We'll make a series of presentations to update the American people on the status of the coronavirus pandemic in the country and then be available to take questions. But we very much appreciate the attendance of all who are here and all of you who have made time to tune in. As we reported today, we have now more than 2,500,000 Americans that have contracted the coronavirus. And sadly, we've lost more than 126,000 of our countrymen to this disease. And I know I speak for the President and for every American when we express our sympathies and our deepest condolences to all the families who have lost loved ones. Despite those losses, since the end of our 45 days to slow the spread and the beginning of efforts to open up America, thanks to the cooperation of the American people, the efforts of governors and state health officials, efforts, I want to proudly say, of the entire federal team under the leadership of President Trump, we have made truly remarkable progress in moving our nation forward. We've all seen the encouraging news as we open up America again. More than 3 million jobs created in the last job report. Retail sales are rolling. And of course, the extraordinary progress in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New Orleans, areas that just a matter of a month ago were struggling under the weight of this pandemic, and now have arrived at a very, very different place. As we stand here today, all 50 states and territories across this country are opening up safely and responsibly. But with cases rising, particularly over the past week throughout the South, President Trump directed our task force to brief the American people on several topics. First, we want to share with you, as Dr. Birx will, what we're seeing in the rise of new cases that today surmounted 40,000 new cases in a single day. Secondly, we want to speak about what we've done and what we are doing at the federal level to support the state efforts, particularly in the states where we see rising cases. We'll talk today about how this moment in the coronavirus pandemic is different than what we saw 2 months ago, to better equip the American people to respond. And ultimately, we will speak about what every American can do to play their part in reducing the spread and the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. For our part, also, I've spoken to governors in Arizona and Florida and Texas in the last 12 hours. And Dr. Birx and I will be traveling on Sunday to Texas, on Tuesday to Arizona, and I'll be traveling to Florida on Thursday of next week to get a ground report. And of course, on Monday we will conduct what will be our 26th weekly call with the entire White House Coronavirus Task Force and all of the nation's governors as we meet this moment. As I mentioned, it's important gathering today. I think that we take a step back and think about how far we've come as a country. When the president tapped me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force, he said we had one mission, and that was to save lives. President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China in January, to stand up the White House Coronavirus Task Force, in February to declare a national emergency, to halt travel from Europe and amend travel from other places around the country, all contributed to giving our nation time to stand up a broad-based response, the whole of government response that we spoke about so many times at the podium throughout this pandemic. We at the State Department also coordinated the repatriation of some 95,000 Americans. And then came the moment when we brought this chart to the President of the United States on the council of our very best scientists. The President was presented with a decision that if we did nothing, no intervention, the possibility existed at that moment in time that we could lose between 1.5 million and 2.2 million Americans. But with intervention and with mitigation, by calling on the American people to embrace the mitigation efforts, social distancing that were called upon, first in the 15 days to slow the spread, that would become 45 days to slow the spread. Our best scientists believe that we could reduce the number of American fatalities to a number ranging between 100,000 and 240,000. The President made that decision. And we unveiled the 15 days that became the 45 days to slow the spread. And inarguably, as we see where we are today as a nation, because of what the American people have done, because of the incredible work of our healthcare workers, because of a partnership with governors in every state, we did just that. We slowed the spread. We flattened the curve. We saved lives. In the midst of that, we exponentially scaled testing capacity, partnering with private sector, commercial laboratories, We've now reached some 30 million tests across the country, conducting some 500,000 tests a day. In that partnership with governors also, the president directed us to make sure that states had what they needed when they needed it. And at this point, I'm pleased to report that the federal government both delivered and facilitated the delivery of billions of supplies of face shields and gowns and gloves and masks, and we continue to be on track to construct more than 100,000 ventilators in 100 days. And as I spoke to governors last night, they confirmed to me again what FEMA's reported. We have no outstanding requests from any state at this time for personal protective equipment or medical supplies. Let me say that again. In the affected areas, particularly the states down south that are seeing rising cases, we have no outstanding requests. But as I told the governors, we are ready at a moment's notice to surge personnel, to surge supplies, to expand capacity, and to support their healthcare response. In the midst of all of that, I think it always bears saying that because of the great work of our healthcare workers and because of American manufacturing, no American who required a ventilator has ever been denied a ventilator in the United States. And I consider that nothing short of a national accomplishment. We also surged hospital capacity in areas of the greatest anticipated need. We sent military and National Guard personnel. These charts showing the progress that we've made in New York and New Jersey and New Orleans all demonstrate the efforts of the people of those states in cooperation with federal government and all the great healthcare workers to show the progress that we made in areas that were once deeply impacted. And we extend our thanks. We extend our thanks to the people of each of those states for the sacrifices that they made during those great and challenging times. But at the close of that 45 days to slow the spread, we unveiled a plan to safely reopen America again. And now all 50 states and territories are moving forward. And as I said, we're seeing America go back to work. And in much of the country, we're seeing jobs expanding and economic activity expanding. But our focus today is very much on the advent of a rising series of new cases across the American South. But where our first mission was to save lives, once we came out of the 45 days to slow the spread, what our task force has been focused on over the course of the past 2 months is to partner with states to save lives and safely reopen. In fact, we've had some 17 meetings of the White House Coronavirus Task Force in the intervening days since we began the process of opening up America again, and we've been working very closely with states to move that agenda forward. But as the President has made clear, we want to open our economy up. We want to move America forward, even while we take and continue to take the steps necessary to protect lives and the health of the American people. We stand here today because with the rising cases among southern states, President Trump asked us to brief the American people to give details on what we're seeing, what we're doing, and how it's different from 2 months ago. As you may recall, after seeing overall cases drop from a 30,000 a day average in April to 25,000 a day average in May, the first few weeks of June actually saw cases averaging roughly 20,000 new cases a day. We now have seen cases begin to rise precipitously across the South. In fact, 34 states, let me make sure I've got my numbers exactly right here. As we reported early on, 34 states across the country, though, are experiencing a measure of stability that is a credit to all of the people of those states. Now, when we speak about stability, we are talking about not necessarily states where there are no new cases, But these would be states where there are either no new cases and no rising percentage, or no combination of those two things. There may be states across the country that are seeing a modest increase in cases, but their percentage of positive rates is remaining very stable. But nevertheless, there are 16 states with rising cases and rising percentages. We'll be focusing on those states today. The first thing we'd share with the American people is that while there is a penchant in the national debate to use a broad brush and to paint an entire state one color if there are rising cases in a portion of the state, this is actually a better picture of the data that we literally analyze every single day. Dr. Birx will take a few moments to unpack the specific outbreaks in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and California. But the first thing we would convey to the American people is that from this new positive results in the last 3 days, you can see the concentration of new cases in specific parts of states, and of course, very specifically in parts of the country. Secondly, we want the American people to understand it's almost inarguable that more testing is generating more cases. To one extent or another, the volume of new cases coming in is a reflection of a great success in expanding testing across the country. As I said at the top, we're testing more than ever before, some 500,000 people a day, and perhaps we could go to that testing chart if it's there, just to show you the acceleration of testing that's taken place over the course of this pandemic in the United States. It's truly been remarkable, and it's been a public and private partnership from the very outset. One of the things that we're seeing among the cases, and we hear this in Florida, and we hear this in Texas and elsewhere, is that roughly half of the new cases are Americans under the age of 35, which is at a certain level very encouraging news, as the experts tell us, because as we know so far in this pandemic, that younger Americans are less susceptible to serious outcomes of the coronavirus. And the fact that we are finding more younger Americans who've contracted the coronavirus is a good thing. And so we'll speak about the testing, and Admiral Brett Giroir is here and can detail any questions that you might have about testing going forward. Thirdly, we'll talk about what these new numbers mean and how we can address them. Dr. Fauci will speak about that in just a moment, particularly in the affected areas. And the other area that we spend a great deal of time thinking about is hospitalization. Not only do we track new cases every day on a county-by-county basis, but we also track hospitalization. And the map on the left of your screen represents how
Clearly, some technical issues as we work to restore the press conference that we're hearing from Washington with the National Coronavirus Task Force providing an update. A quick check of markets as we work to get the press conference back for you live here on Bloomberg Radio. Stocks now trading at a 2-week low. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all declining right now, looking at a 600-point drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, lower now by 2.3%. The S&P 500 index is down 59. That is a drop of 1.9%. Let's continue now. Back we go to Washington, and once again, here's Vice President Mike Pence.
Some 15% of new cases being hospitalized. Now that number is averaging roughly 5% around the country, which is also encouraging news, to say the least. And so while we have 16 states that we're focusing on, again, I would just reiterate to the American people, the most useful thing to know is where it's happening so that you can take the steps necessary to do your part. But rest assured, in our conversations with governors in all of the most impacted states, we continue to be assured that hospital capacity remains strong and they know the federal government stands ready to provide them with the personal protective equipment or supplies or even expanded capacity and personnel to meet any moment. But at this point in time, we are told that in all of the states most deeply impacted, that hospitalization remains very, very broadly available. Finally, I want to speak about the progress that we've made as a country on the most difficult aspect of this. I said at the beginning that our hearts and our prayers go out to the families who've lost loved ones in the course of the coronavirus pandemic. And I know I speak on behalf of everyone in this country when I extend our sympathies to the more than 126,000 families that have lost loved ones. As the President has said many times, one life lost is too many. But nevertheless, I believe at this point in the course of the pandemic, we can still take some comfort in the fact that fatalities are declining all across the country. There literally was a day 2 months ago this week where we lost 2,500 Americans in a single day. This week, because of the extraordinary work of our healthcare workers, because of the availability of new medicines like remdesivir, new treatments like steroids, and because of the cooperation of the American people, heeding the guidance that we gave at the federal level and state and local officials gave. This week, there were 2 days where we lost less than 300 Americans. And you can see from this chart what has been a precipitous decline from some of the worst moments of this pandemic as it impacted areas of New York and New Jersey and the Northeast. Again, I have a heavy heart anytime I recite these numbers, but the fact that we are making progress, reducing the number of Americans that we have lost and are losing, I hope is an encouragement. Because as we see new cases rising, and we're tracking them very carefully, there may be a tendency among the American people to think that we are back to that place that we were 2 months ago, that we're in a time of great losses and great hardship on the American people. The reality is we're in a much better place with the efforts President Trump mobilized at the federal level, with the efforts of this team, this whole of government approach, the efforts of governors across the country, our incredible healthcare workers, and the cooperation of the American people. We're in a much stronger place. The truth is we did slow the spread. We flattened the curve. We were able to stand up the resources and the capacities in our healthcare system to be able to meet this coronavirus in a way that would put the health of all of our country first. We also cared for the most vulnerable and continue to focus resources in testing and supplies on the most vulnerable, seniors with serious underlying conditions. And I too believe with all my heart that we've continued to save lives. We've created a solid foundation for whatever challenges come, either in the days ahead or in the months ahead. And that's a credit. That's a credit, I believe, to our president, to our federal team, to our state partners. But mostly it's a credit to the American people and our healthcare workers. And so we stand here today. We believe we've made progress. But as we are reminded as we see cases rising across the South, that we still have work to do. And so we say to every American, particularly those in counties and in states that are being impacted by rising cases, that now's the time for everybody to continue to do their part. And I think you'll hear from this podium today a particular message to younger Americans across the Sun Belt, and the role that you can play in protecting the vulnerable, and making sure that while the coronavirus doesn't represent as significant a threat for a serious outcome to a younger American, none of us would want to bring the disease back to our parents or grandparents, moms and dads, an elderly friend, or a friend who has an immunodeficiency and cause a serious outcome as well. And so we leave you just with the guidelines for all of the phases. When we put out the guidelines to open up America again, we laid out at the outset guidance for responsible reopening, and states across the country, as I mentioned, are doing just that. 34 states are reopening safely and responsibly and seeing low and steady cases and not seeing a rise in the percentage of positives. And in the 16 states that are being impacted, particularly those that we'll focus on here today, we would just encourage every American to follow the guidelines for all the phases. Continue to practice good hygiene, wash your hands, avoid touching your face, disinfect frequently. People who feel sick should stay home, and when it comes to businesses, social distancing, protective equipment, temperature checks, testing and isolation. These are the guidelines for all of the phases, and they are good practices to implement if you're in a community that's affected, or even if you are not, because we're all in this together. And the progress that we made, that you saw illustrated in those charts in places like New York and New Jersey, Connecticut and New Orleans, was a result of the American people stepping forward, heeding the guidance of federal, state, and local authorities. And we encourage you to continue to do just that. But
again,
for those
ongoing technical issues with the feed coming out of Washington, D.C. and the briefing with Mike Pence, let me give you a quick update on what is happening in U.S. financial markets right now. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining. S&P now lower by 1.8% off our session lows, but still showing a drop of 54 points. NASDAQ is down 1.7% at 98.45. Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by 550, a drop there of 2.1%. Let's return to Washington. Once again, here's Vice President Mike Pence.
Podium, I just encourage every American to continue to pray. Pray for all the families that have lost loved ones. Pray for our healthcare workers on the front lines. And just continue to pray that by God's grace, every single day, will each of us do our part to heal our land. With that, I'll introduce the coordinator of the White House effort on the coronavirus, Dr. Deborah Birx.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for that great introduction. Just to remind everybody where we have come from in the last 4 months, we have a great deal of understanding now about the differential disease. Differential infections, no. We believe everybody is susceptible to infection. But we know infection leads to a spectrum of disease, and we have much better details about who is vulnerable and why they are vulnerable. And as the Vice President said, at one time, we were diagnosing people in the ICU after they came into the emergency room. And thanks to the millennials who have been heeding our guidance, they have been coming forward and getting testing. And so whereas before we told them to stay home, now we are telling them to be tested. And this is a great change for us because it allows us now to find the asymptomatic and the mild diseases that we couldn't find before. As Dr. Redfield talked about yesterday, from the serology test, we have a great understanding of what was happening in March and the number of asymptomatic and mild conditions that led to individuals to have antibody but never come forward with significant disease. We now know who's at risk for significant disease. And we now know it's particularly the elderly, individuals over 80, and individuals with comorbidities. And remember, those comorbidities span the entire age group. We do know that we have people in the younger age groups with significant type 1 diabetes and may also have individuals with significant obesity. We know that those are risk factors. And so risk factors go with your comorbidity, not necessarily with your age. And so as we call on individuals to protect one another, by passing someone on the street, you don't know what comorbidities they have. And this is why we've been focused on trying to protect one another. We also know who's at risk for the highest mortality, and because of that, we've been able to, the clinical care has dramatically improved. And I want to thank NIH, who has been working constantly to update the clinical guidelines. So physicians around the United States and frankly around the world who are using those have the most updated information about how to actually improve disease courses of those that are in the hospital. We, of course, have improved treatment in the hospital that we didn't have in March and April, with improved methods of oxygenation, which is really quite important, improved treatment of acute respiratory distress, that's that individuals on the ventilator, we know now will respond quite well to steroids. And then research that is ongoing on what we call the acute cytokine storm. That is when often in that later stage when people are on ventilators, they're seriously ill, may need steroids and other items, and that's being researched. And the work that's being done on clotting research by the NIH. We also have new therapeutics that have been used both as compassionate use like convalescent plasma, and now remdesivir, that we just reallocated and ensured it was available to these states that are facing the increased hospitalization, as well as the monthly allocations that we have been sending out. If we can go to the first slide, please, and start where the Vice President left off. Really, this disease is tackled community by community, testing at the community level and working with community groups to understand the spread in those communities. And so we've spent the time to really map this epidemic and new positives down to the level of communities to understand where spread is occurring so that we can match our prevention interventions to those areas. Next slide, please. As we discussed, and it's difficult for you to see on this graphic because the top line is New York. And we should remember where we were in that slope, that early slope that you can see in the case of the New York cases, that rapid acceleration. On the same slide, you can see California, that is the blue line that is just passing the orange line. And also on the slide is Texas in green, Florida in orange, and Arizona at the bottom. As dramatic as these slopes are, they are not equivalent to the original acceleration that we saw in New York. That doesn't mean that we aren't absolutely focused on working with the governors in those communities to stop the spread of the virus in those 4 states. Next slide, please. This shows you through the entire country that we're tracking state by state. Now, obviously, this axis is vastly different than the one on the prior slide because that slide included all of the cases in New York City. But you can see on this slide that we've been tracking very closely North Carolina. A team's been in with North Carolina working with the state and local public health authorities to really respond to the changes there, as well as the South Carolina at the bottom. Next slide, I'll just go quickly through these so you can see Oklahoma's at the bottom of this slide. And next slide, you can see on this slide Idaho and Oregon. Those are the ones in the light blue and the dark green where you see an inflection in their slopes. These inflection points and understanding when they occur and why they occur are critical for understanding how to prevent the spread. Next slide. Now, what the Vice President talked about is we've created an alert system that brings together what we just talked about, rising cases with an understanding of test positivity. And so this chart, which is difficult for you to see, those states on that far side that have the highest test positive that you can see at the higher level of the graph. Those are the states that we have concerns about because of the rising number of cases and the rising test positive. This explains the extent of community spread. In states that have increasing cases but falling test positives, it tells us that they're getting into the communities to find the asymptomatic cases. And so these are the things we put together to understand the full picture. Next slide, please. So this really puts on one slide the states that we have, that we've been talking about across the South, where we have our greatest concerns. The 2 top states with the largest increase in test positives are Texas and Arizona, followed by Florida, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Nevada, and Utah. Those last few states are under still 10%, but we're tracking them closely as we look at that individually. Finally, next slide. You can see on this slide, we are tracking, and this is when you hear about, we have a certain 2% or 3% of the counties under specific alerts. So it doesn't matter the size of the county, we're tracking the increase and the rate of increase of new cases at the county level. We currently have about 130 counties out of the 3,100 in the United States in that category. Next slide. Metro level, this shows you the case positivity by the metros and the number of tests that have been done. Next slide. And then this shows you specifically the change over time of test positivity in the largest metros where we have concerns, and this is Austin, Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Riverside, California, and Atlanta at the bottom. And so this is how we continue to integrate data on cases, data on testing, and data on hospitalizations so that we can work with the states for a comprehensive integrated response. Next slide. I know many of you would be interested in seeing how high the test positivity rate became in April and March and April. So that top line is New York City Metro, and you can see it reached over 50% on a series of days for almost 2 weeks. 50% of the tests were positive for COVID-19. Underneath that, you see New Jersey and Minnesota and a whole series of individuals. Detroit is the second large mountain. Next slide. So quickly to show you how we look at this at the state level and work with the governors and the local health authorities. So this is Florida. We track testing. It's done, the number of test positives that are in the blue line, the total number of cases seen in the black bar, and what we call the syndromic presentations of early respiratory diseases and pneumonias. Next slide. This then, we look at the county level to look for changes in the slope of the number of new cases. So you can see that top county that has the largest increase in slope in cases is Miami, Miami-Dade, followed by Broward and Palm Beach. All the other counties are much lower in their daily case increases. This allows us to focus resources and testing along with the state into these specific sites. Next slide. That all comes together to create this graphic so that individuals can understand and we can understand precisely what the rate of growth is and where the rate of growth is occurring by the shading of the boxes. Now I'm going to quickly take you through Texas because it's the same story. Next slide. So this shows you the exact same graphics now shown for Texas, showing a continued rise in the daily tests performed, but also a rise in the test positivity, the blue line. You can see throughout May, after opening, their test positivity continued to decline as their testing increased. It was in the last 2.5 weeks that we saw this inflection of rising test positivity along with rising testing. But it was the increase in test positivity that alerted us, along with the increased cases, that this was becoming an alert. You can see in the red boxes, everything is heat mapped. So at a glance, you can tell those 2 boxes that are in the middle that are red, that's the heat map showing that this has rising cases and rising test positivity. Next slide. But even in Texas, next slide, please. And this gives you a map of Texas, or shows where the cases are and where they're rising the most rapidly. And finally, I'm just going to go through Arizona very quickly along with California. So next slide. Same situation that we're showing here with Arizona, rising number of tests being performed, but also rising test positivity, rising cases. Next slide. Arizona is unique, and they have essentially one county that is primarily represented by the depth of the new cases, and this is in the Phoenix area. Next slide. Then next slide. So this is California. And so you can see California over the last week has had that increase in test positivity. You can see that dramatic increase at the end of that bar in the blue line, along with still increasing testing that has been done. And we just want to thank all of the governors and all of the work at all the laboratories that has allowed us, along with HHS and Brett Gerard, who ensured that the supplies were there to really increase these orange lines. You could see in each of these cases, these orange lines have dramatically gone up over the last 4 weeks. Next slide. And like New Mexico, the primary infections right now in California at the highest level are in the LA area. But because LA is a large metropolitan area, next slide, you really need this kind of more specific and local graphic to really show that it's also increasing in the Central Valley. And this gives us the ability to focus resources among agricultural workers to improve testing and isolation for those who become positive. So I just wanted to take you through how we've been looking at data, how we consolidate that data, and then Monday report it out to the governors. We hope over the next week to be able to really have this data available in real time on the White House website so that everybody across the country can see where the cases are. Because in the end, we really want to call to action. When we started talking about what can be done, we said the most important thing that would change the spread, and I'm going to turn that over because I know Tony's going to talk about it, is really individual behavior and our respect for one another through social distancing, wearing a mask, and ensuring that we're protecting the most vulnerable that may be in multi-generational households. And I just want to end by thanking again the millennials who have come forward. And I know during the protests we asked a lot of them to go forward to get testing, and we see those testing rates really improving in the under 40 age group. That is going to be important to continue to accelerate testing among the under 40 age group, because that's the age group most likely to have asymptomatic spread and be spreading the virus unbeknownst to them. And I want to really make it clear, no one is intentionally spreading the virus, but they don't know that they're positive, they don't have symptoms, and need to be tested in order to have that awareness. And so we really want to thank them again for coming forward and really enriching the amount of testing that has been done in the under 40-year-old age group. And to our older population, you know if you have comorbidities, you know if you're over 80. We ask you if in these hot spots in these states that are having expansion in cases to continue to shelter as much as you can and use your grandchildren to go and do your shopping.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birx, and thank you, Mr. Vice President. So I want to extend just for a couple of minutes some of the comments that were made both by the Vice President and by Dr. Birx, and it has to do with the situation that we find ourselves facing right now. It's very clear from the maps that you saw that there are certain areas in the country, states, towns, cities, regions, that are doing very well, that have followed the guidelines and are opening up in a prudent way that's been effective. However, as you can see, we are facing a serious problem in certain areas. Now, when you look at the map, it's very interesting because you see some dark parts of the map and some light parts of the map. We have a very heterogeneous country, but heterogeneity does not mean that we are not intimately interconnected with each other. So what goes on in one area of the country ultimately could have an effect on the other areas of the country. So let's take a look at this problem that we're facing now, this resurgence of cases. I don't think there's time enough now all day to try and analyze and figure out the multifaceted elements that went into that. You know, everything from maybe opening a little bit too early on some to opening at the right time, but not actually following the steps in an orderly fashion, to actually trying to follow the steps in an orderly fashion, but the citizenry did not feel that they wanted to do that for a number of reasons, likely because everyone feels the common feeling of being pent up for such a long period of time. So we're not going to say blame, we're not going to try and analyze it, but there is something that's very important about it that I'd like to get a message to the country in general. When you have an outbreak of an infectious disease, it's a dynamic process that is global. So remember, what happened in China affected us. What happened in Europe affected us. What's happening here is affecting others. We can't get away from that. It's interconnected. So therefore, if we are an interconnected society, we've got to look at the fact of what our role is in trying to put an end to this, because everybody wants to end it, everybody wants to get back to normal, and everybody wants the economy to recover. I think we all are pretty common in that. That's a given. So, what can we do? What I think, upon talking to a lot of people and reflecting on it, we have such an unusual situation because of all of the decades that I've been involved in chasing infectious diseases. I've never seen anything that is so protean in its ability to make people sick or not. There's no other infectious disease that goes from 40% of the people having no symptoms to some having mild symptoms, to some having severe, some requiring staying at home for weeks, some going to the hospital, some getting intensive care, some getting intubated, some getting ventilated, and some dying. So that depending on where you are in that spectrum, you have a different attitude to this particular thing. But anyone who gets infected or is at risk of getting infected, to a greater or lesser degree, is part of the dynamic process of the outbreak. And I know, because I can understand when I was at a stage in my life when I said, well, I'm invulnerable, so I'm going to take a risk. I think what we're missing in this is something that we've never faced before, is that a risk for you is not just isolated to you. Because if you get infected, you are part, innocently or inadvertently, of propagating the dynamic process of a pandemic. Because the chances are that if you get infected, that you're going to infect someone else. And although you may feel well, and because we know, if you look at the numbers that you'll probably hear later on, the overwhelming majority now of people who are getting infected are young people, likely the people that you see in the clips and in the paper who are out in crowds enjoying themselves, understandably. No blame there, understandably. But the thing that you really need to realize, that when you do that, you are part of a process. So if you get infected, you will infect someone else who clearly will infect someone else. We know that happens because the reproduction element of the virus is not less than one. So people are infecting other people. And then ultimately you will infect someone who's vulnerable. Now that may be somebody's grandmother, grandfather, uncle who's on chemotherapy, aunt who's on radiation or chemotherapy, or a child who has leukemia. So there is what I call, and again, I just want to bring this out without making it seem that anybody's at fault. You have an individual responsibility to yourself, but you have a societal responsibility. Because if we want to end this outbreak, really end it, and then hopefully when a vaccine comes and puts the nail in the coffin, we've got to realize that we are part of the process. So when the vice president went back, pulling back a couple of months ago, when we showed about the guidelines to safely reopen the country, we've got to make sure we drop back a few yards and think about that this is part of a process that we can be either part of the solution or part of the problem. So I just want to make a plea with people when they understand the stress that they're under, as we try to tackle not only those states, but the light-colored part of the country, even though they've done well. They may have gotten hit badly like New York and then came down, or they may not have gotten hit badly at all. They are vulnerable. If we don't extinguish the outbreak, sooner or later, even ones that are doing well are going to be vulnerable to the spread. So we need to take that into account, because we are all in it together. And the only way we're going to end it is by ending it together. Thank you.
Well, first, thank you all for joining us here at HHS to update the American people. I want to begin by thanking everyone around the country working to defeat this virus. All of the healthcare providers on the front lines, those working to reopen our economy safely, the American people who have sacrificed so much in this fight, and the incredible members of our HHS team who've been working tirelessly to protect the health and well-being of all Americans. Before covering today's topic, I want to mention a major milestone for global health yesterday. The end of the second largest Ebola outbreak in history in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. We congratulate the Congolese government and all of the healthcare workers and community members involved, some of whom I had the chance to meet and thank in the DRC last fall. Under President Trump, the United States was proud to play a bigger role in this major public health victory than any other single nation. And now, thanks to the President and the Vice President's leadership and the hard work of our team, America has never been readier to combat COVID-19. We've built up our readiness under the strategy we developed to address surges, save lives, and in time defeat the virus. We're in a much stronger position to support states, hospitals, and individuals as they fight back. There are 6 parts to the strategy: surveillance, testing, containment, healthcare capacity, therapeutics, and vaccines. First, we've been strengthening surveillance so that we can be aware of and respond to surges. That means, for instance, being able to track more cases among younger Americans that we never would have caught earlier in the pandemic. Second, we have the world's greatest testing capabilities, enabling us to confirm the presence of the virus when it crops up, and we're confident that capacity will continue to rise in the coming months. Third, states are building the capacity to track and contain outbreaks of the virus. With federal help, many states have substantially expanded their own capabilities, and we're deploying knowledgeable, experienced CDC and HHS public health teams to the areas now seeing increases, with a focus on community testing and community-based interventions. Fourth, we're helping healthcare systems secure sufficient capacity and supplies. We've dramatically expanded American manufacturing of PPE, and the FDA has authorized new technologies to sterilize equipment for reuse. We've spoken with hospitals and states that are building up their own PPE reserves, many of them getting up to 60 or 90 days of supplies. Through the Strategic National Stockpile, we have far more visibility into the supply needs across the country, including centralized coordination capabilities that we lacked just a few short months ago. Visiting healthcare providers around the country, I've seen how they're adapting to bring patients back while taking appropriate precautions. America's hospitals are ready to get back to business while maintaining their readiness for COVID-19. The fifth and sixth elements of this strategy are thanks to the President's Operation Warp Speed. We now have promising therapeutics that are benefiting tens of thousands of American patients and in all likelihood have already saved thousands of lives. We've identified 2 very promising pharmaceutical treatments, remdesivir and dexamethasone. As of today, we've allocated more than 120,000 courses of remdesivir to all of the 50 states. We've added dexamethasone, a very low-cost steroid, to our treatment guidelines, and we believe it's reasonable to assume that other corticosteroids, which may be more readily accessible in some places, would have similar immunological effects. Another promising therapeutic, convalescent plasma, has been used to treat more than 25,000 Americans in nearly 3,000 sites across the country. There are no certainties in science, but with more than 140 clinical trials underway in the U.S., it's a pretty safe bet that more good news on therapeutics is on the way and on the way soon. Finally, we've announced large investments to support 3 different vaccine candidates all the way through to manufacturing. These candidates are now in human clinical trials, some with the potential to start delivering safe and effective doses before the end of the year, and we'll be adding support for several more candidates. We're expanding manufacturing capacity and already making the vials, needles, and syringes that we may need. Our capabilities have grown exponentially in the time allowed by the patriotic sacrifices of the American people. We have a much better grasp of the virus, as Dr. Birx said, and much more data with which to model it. With that data, as you've heard today, we can focus on local trends. We have some very concerning hotspots, and we can track when other hotspots emerge, as we expect they may. We're focused on the states and the counties within those states, just 3% of counties that represent hotspots. It's important for the American people to be aware of this variability and variation across the country. Americans need to understand their local trends because we want to help people make the right decisions for themselves. Making decisions for yourself has to be based on 3 axes of risk, as our Surgeon General taught us in March. You want to assess where you are, who you are and whom you live with, and what activity you're thinking about doing. There are gradations of risk within each of these axes. Going to an outdoor restaurant in Montana is a great deal different from a crowded indoor bar in Houston. When you interact with fewer people in an activity, When you interact with them for a shorter period of time, your risk is reduced, and individuals can balance these kinds of factors. What I've laid out today is remarkable progress by the President's administration, and a particular credit to the team here at HHS. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but Americans can be confident that we have a rock-solid foundation to help us get safely back to work, back to school, back to worship, and back to health care, while we tackle surges of the virus where they occur. Thanks to President Trump's leadership, we've got the capabilities, the knowledge, and the strategy to protect Americans' lives and their livelihoods at the same time. And every American should feel proud of that. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I wanted to add some comments. Once again, I want to stress and thank all Americans to embrace the importance of social distancing recommendations to slow the spread of COVID. As I've said before, we're not defenseless. These are, in fact, very powerful weapons, and it's our collective responsibility to recommit ourselves to put them into routine practice. Again, to stay 6 feet apart from each other as much as possible, to wear face coverings when we're in public, and to practice vigorous hand hygiene. And to commit to do so, as we've heard today, to do our part to protect the vulnerable. I also want to appeal to the millennials and those that are under 40. It's really important that this group really commit themselves to these practices to protect those at risk. And it's not just the elderly that are at risk. Many of us may have friends and colleagues that are younger that may not advertise their underlying comorbidities, as the case would be with, say, type 1 diabetes or an underlying immune deficiency. So, again, asking this team of millennials and younger people in this country to come and commit themselves. I agree with Ambassador Birx. We're very thankful that the group is now coming forward to get tested, but I also want this group to put into vigilant practice the importance of our social distancing. The one thing that I wanted to stress, though, is that there are differences in what we're experiencing today than what we all experienced in March and April and May. And one of the things I want us to focus on is not the cases per se, but the consequences, the impact of those cases. It wasn't long ago, probably within 2 months ago, it's hard to believe, I don't think many people realize, that 27% of all deaths that occurred in the United States actually died of a pneumonia. That was a pneumonia, could have been influenza, could have been COVID. 27%, 1 in 4 of all the deaths in the United States just 2 months ago was caused by pneumonia. I'm happy to say today the deaths to pneumonia in this nation is back to baseline. It's about 7%. It's a big difference. A lot of those pneumonias that were dying were actually COVID-infected individuals that were the elderly, nursing homes, and individuals with comorbidities. We are seeing, despite these increased cases, we have seen a progressive decline in deaths. The last, say, 2-week average deaths in the United States now is around 650. And as you heard the Vice President, it wasn't long ago that, sadly, we were losing 25,000 individuals a day. So I think it's critical that we continue to focus on that, the consequences. And it's part of that why it's important that we continue also to look forward to how we deal with and contain and control the COVID infection, but as we also change the consequences of the impact it's had on education in this country or as an economy and business. So again, as I close, I want to just re-emphasize how important for now, for individuals to really think seriously, as Tony said, about the responsibility to others that we have, because this infection pathogen really does have the capacity to cause quite serious illness in individuals at high risk, and embrace our nation's recommendations that the Vice President put up again that we have for all phases of reopening America. Again, I also want to thank the younger groups for stepping forward and getting tested. Clearly what we're seeing now is this age group is much more likely to be asymptomatic. And again, to make that commitment to do their part to protect those of us that, whether we're young or old, have a comorbidity and would be more vulnerable.